Evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. WeatherBrains episode 1001. We're starting on our second group of 1000 shows here. 1001. What a great show we had last week. What a great time in Huntsville at Barren Weather. We appreciate their sponsorship and getting everybody all together in one place at one time. But tonight we got a big show. Goodness gracious. We have some absolute legends about to join us here. The IQ power we're about to bring in here, it's tremendous. But for those that don't know, this is the pre-show. This is the magical time of the program where we typically do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and from time to time we say very outrageous things. But yeah, we've got a really, really amazing list of folks on the show here tonight. Goodness gracious. An all-star cast, including our new regular, John Gordon. So let's bring them in here. They are lined up and waiting to go. And here they come. First off, a quick shout out to my friends at Valparaiso University. I was in northern Indiana over the weekend and had a chance to speak at their Great Lakes Meteorology Conference. And those kids were just great. The students were great. Faculty, it was just a really, really well-organized event, good content, and it was an absolute treat. So a quick thanks to my friends at Valpo. Tom Skilling, you ever been to Valparaiso University?
I have. And you know something? I was there, James, for the unveiling of their new meteorology building. They used to work out of a basement in a building there, and they unveiled this beautiful new complex down there. We've had a number of Valpo interns with us, not the least of which was Ginger Z, who's with ABC right now. And what a wonderful department, really is.
Yeah, it was
Bart
good.
Wolf was the lead in that. He's a fellow Badger, and his PhD advisor was Don Johnson, was my PhD advisor.
Is there anything else we can do?
He made it
Louis,
happen.
Bart came back. He came back and he presented at the conference, and he was great. He looked great, energized. He was good as ever. It was great to see Bart. He was great.
Great
guy. Great guy. So.
Yeah.
And John Gordon, our own John Gordon, presented at the conference, so he'll be joining us here in just a second. So,
awesome.
Really, really good content, and I really appreciate a well-organized conference. Those are hard to put together, and the students do all the work, and it was just very well done. So, a big shout out to everybody at Valpo for a very good weekend. Let's see, John is there. He is. There's my modest man. My modest man.
Yes. And there he is on the Gulf Coast down there, looking good. Hi, Tim.
Wait a minute. What is this? A live? Is that chroma key or is that real?
No, this is real deal, James, man. This is a span-worthy sunset.
Look at that.
Wow.
It's a little better.
How about that?
Are you kidding me? Goodness gracious.
That's about as that's a span to order
up maybe a little
sunset right there.
This is as good as it gets. Wow.
Yes, indeed.
And I wish I had a taller chair. I'd just leave it right there.
Is that the Flash Gordon or is that John Gordon? Just good old John.
Yeah.
Louis, so good to see you, Louis.
Yeah.
You look really good.
Hey, I try every minute. I'm still alive, so thank you.
Look, Louis looks 10 years younger since he's retired. What's the deal?
I lost a lot of weight. Yeah.
You look great. I mean, what's the secret?
Stay away from red meat, get good night's sleeps, and work on volume 3 of the Snowstorm monograph. That'll keep it going.
I'm ready to pre-order a copy right now, Louis. Sign me up.
You better put a time thing on it because the volumes 1 and 2 took 10 years, and we're only 2.5 years into this thing. So
wow. Louis, are you working with Paul Cosin on that too?
Say what?
Are you working with Paul Cosin on the snowstorm update?
Yeah, and we've been able to entice 2 other people to work through this volume 3. It'll be like first quarter of the 21st century or the first 30 years. I'm betting on the first 30 years.
You have a light shirt,
but we got Dave Novak and Toma Berg working with us to carry the
I don't know, Dan. Just nothing's going to help unless we have a lot of light.
Oh, that's good.
Hey, and there's
Oh,
Paul.
how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I look a little dark in my picture here, but I guess it's all right.
Well, your face
Yeah.
looks lovely and bright. I tell you that. So it's good to see you,
Yeah,
Paul.
it's like a little ghost here or something.
Yeah,
I think.
you're floating on the background there. Looks
Yeah, I
good.
don't know what to how to lighten that up a little bit.
You look like an MTV video from the 1980s, maybe the Talking Heads or something.
That's what happens when you get old timers on these shows, you know.
Yeah.
I want my MTV.
Y'all be careful.
Okay.
Rick Smith's just joining us. Be careful.
Yeah, everybody behave. All right, the sheriff is back in town.
That's right. He's our
I gotta
disciplinary officer
Oh,
here.
is that right?
Let me try
Yeah,
that.
I wanted to
Hey.
ask John. John, are you still working in the? You still in
No,
weather service? Or have you retired?
I took the fork on February 28th. So
Oh,
it was a very hard day. I've been forked.
Show
Oh,
title.
boy.
Show title.
Tom freaking Skilling came and forked me.
Oh no.
That's good. That's good.
Wow.
James is writing that one down.
Jen, how are
No.
you?
I'm great. It's so good to see you, Tom.
Good to see you too. Going to be an interesting program tonight.
Yes.
Lots to talk about.
You bet.
Yes. Yes.
So do we know what if Neil's going to join us? Anybody know?
I hope so.
By the way,
We'd love to
Bill
have Neil.
reported earlier, he sent me a picture of himself and his wife there and reported it was 70 degrees down there on the Gulf Coast in Alabama. So, Bill, you beat us by about 20 degrees up here in Chicago today.
Yeah, we were watching you walk along Lake Michigan with those waves breaking along the shore yesterday with
I'll
about,
tell you.
what was it, Tom, about 45 degrees? And
Yeah.
I felt guilty for shivering down here when it was 70.
Well, you warmed me up seeing it warm there and that beautiful sunset. Oh, my word. That's gorgeous.
It'll be 78 tomorrow, so it'll
Oh,
be nearly perfect.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. Beautiful.
So
Louis,
we're
you
missing
in?
Troy, we're missing
Okay, you can sit
Kim,
here.
and we're missing Neil. So hopefully they'll join us here shortly.
usually
comes
people
Troy.
who are scheduled for a hearing, for opposition, they're not allowed. They're not allowed to, engage in this. They want them until they are on the Hill and they have their Senate testimony behind them. So I'd be surprised if he was here.
Yeah,
He
you're
came-
you're probably right. Really, yeah,
I
he
know
came
people-
down to our 1,000th show Monday night, but
Wow.
he was pretty tight-lipped.
Yeah.
But he promises he's going to wear a WeatherBrains hoodie at his confirmation hearing so that
All right.
he'll promote the show.
It'll kind of fit with the new administration. Maybe we can be the first sponsor of NOAA.
There he
There you
is.
go.
Troy.
Hello,
All right.
Tom Skilling, and hey, Louis.
How you doing, Troy?
Doing well, sir. Thank you.
Hey, Troy, doesn't Louis look 10 years younger? I mean, this
No,
retirement
man,
thing is
these
working
are
out
all
for him.
these are all young men here. I'm telling you now,
Very-
man. And then, of course, the youngest of everyone that's joining us at this point is Jen. And she's just amazing in her world travels, which I've learned more about in the last week.
Thank you, Troy.
And let's welcome our television viewers. We are at the top of the hour, so we can get the show started. It's Monday night. We have no active weather in the local market here, so we are good to go. So let's get this thing started. We got a lot to talk about tonight. We're going to record track number 1. We're going to record track number 2. And here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to WeatherBrains. They're kind of a big deal.
The pipes of Bill Curtis. I don't know if we're a big deal or not, but man, we've been around for a long time. This is WeatherBrains episode 1001.
Wow.
1001 for the 24th of March, 2025. We had a great time, just a great time last week in Huntsville at Barron Weather. Thanks to Bob Barron and everybody there for hosting us and getting everybody together. And and Jen, first off, let me just thank you for the work that you put into this. You and Bill, Jen, it was a great show.
Oh, thank you, James. Yeah, I loved it. And I really enjoyed getting to meet some of the brains for the first time in person, and just our camaraderie and hanging out. I just had a blast. So thank you guys so much. And
I thought y'all told me that we were going to get to be on the road every week now, and and y'all going to put that all together. I was planning on going to Iuka, Mississippi or something, and
I'd be having heart palpitations here, Troy. None of this discussion now.
Oh.
So
hey,
let's see here. I see that Dr. James Adelot in Tulsa, Oklahoma is back with us. James, you missed the party. You missed the party last week.
Yeah, but he brought the house down.
Oh,
James
man.
Spann, with that video he sent.
Yeah, no,
So
the book video was too good.
Yep.
I wonder where those books are anyway. They're going to be in a box somewhere in a warehouse, right? Safekeeping.
I want mine. I want
back
you to...
here. Send me
I want mine. Yeah. Where's mine?
Yeah. No, if you did not get a chance to watch, and I think you really need to watch the episode 1000. Most people listen, but you might just want to take the time to watch. The piece that James Adelot put together was indeed one of the highlights. It was too good. So the man is good. We heard the melodious tones of Rick Smith, WCM at the National Weather Service in Norman, Oklahoma. Rick, how are you tonight? Thanks for coming to Huntsville last week.
Oh, I'm good. I'm so glad I got to come. It was so fun to see everybody and hang out. And man, they Ben and all the crew, that was a first class setup we had there. That was, you get spoiled by that. That was very cool.
Yep.
Hey,
welcome John Gordon too. By the way, tonight.
Yeah, we're about to formally welcome John Gordon here in just a second. But first off, let's bring in Dr. McLean here. You came in, you made it to Huntsville, but just barely missed the show. But thanks for coming all the way in.
Well, absolutely. I'm so glad that I was still able to make it, at least to see you all. I had never met Jen in person in all of these years. And that needed to get rectified. So
absolutely. That was fun. We had a good time, and it was so great just to hang out. So I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and your Aunt Dee Dee was worth the price of admission.
I know. Oh, she's fantastic. I think I'm wearing her out. We're still on our trip. We're in Fort Worth right now, and she's just been a trooper going to these libraries. I think she's enjoying it and doing all the research with me. So we're here at some cousin's house right now and staying for the week in Fort Worth, doing some little side trips and seeing if I can get some more tornadoes for Thomas Grisoulis for significant tornadoes. I may have a couple to add to the book. So
wow, yeah. She was. I think she was wearing us out, Jen. She was.
Yeah, really.
I think she was.
And for those that don't know what happened, see, I had to go back to work. I had to be at work at 4 a.m. So when the show's over, I had to leave. But these guys went on a pub crawl in Huntsville, Alabama.
Not in Huntsville, Alabama, James. Everything shut down at 10 o'clock. So.
It didn't take long.
It was pretty much over when we walked in the door.
Right. Well, it was over when we walked into the local pub establishment, but we may have made our own back at the conference hotel. That might have happened.
Maybe.
I heard y'all were like up till 11 o'clock. I'm at the restaurant and I go, I forget who. I guess John, did you take me back? Who took me back to the hotel? Yeah, I said that's it. Bedtime for Troy, okay? Bedtime for Troy.
I was tucked in my bed when the box of wine came out.
Oh, yeah. And then I heard there was this party going on for the rest of the night down in the lobby. So
no truth to the rumors that the Madison police were called and nothing like that.
It was very subdued.
It was very subdued, and the front desk clerk said that she'd herself wanted to be a meteorologist, so she was having a grand time listening to us. We felt it was the most fitting way that we could see Neil off into, the administration was helping him have a proper after party.
Agreed.
Until 2 a.m. It was great.
It was.
Well, Bill Murray, I'm going to give it to you because we have to first off introduce our new regular showcast member here. I am so excited. For this to happen. This is too good, but you bring in the news here.
Yeah, I think I got to let Jen do this because Jen is the reason. She reached out to me and said, "Don't you think Don Gordon would be a perfect panelist?" I said, "Well, let me check with the big guy," and because there's nobody better that I could imagine. So I said, of course, I'd gone to Tom Skilling, and he's too busy having fun on vacation. I'd gone to Tom, and Tom was like, "Bill, I'd do it in a heartbeat, but I'm loving this retirement thing." And Jim was like, "Bill, don't you think John would be a great panelist?" And I was like, "Oh man, what a fabulous idea!" And of course, Span just check that real fast. But Jen, you take it from here.
Yeah, we decided we're not going to let him to enjoy retirement. We're going to let him get on the show with us. But no, it was a no-brainer, pun intended there, James A., to have Gordon on the show. He is fun. He is very energetic, and just so knowledgeable. I've learned so much from John Gordon since building a friendship with him over the past couple of years. And I just think he has a lot to offer to our audience and just a wealth of knowledge from his years working with the National Weather Service. So John Gordon, get on here, talk a little bit about how excited you are to be on with this little crew.
I am really happy about this. I knew Tom Skilling would be your first choice, but I'm thankful to be second because I've been friends with James for a long time, and Troy and Jen and Rick. I just love the group. And the first show I get to be on, and this is true. I told everyone says, "Who's your favorite TV weather person?" I always say the same answer: Tom Skilling.
Oh,
yes.
No question. No question.
Beyond words.
Tom is gone. James was 1B. James, you're not
exactly, John Gordon. That's right.
I'll take 1B to Tom Skilling anytime.
Yep.
That's nice. Thank you, John.
It is a very fitting start to the I'll say the second century of WeatherBrains, James. How about that?
Exactly. We're just getting started. We are just getting started.
Yeah, did you come up with that title for last week? That was a great title for last week's show.
Yeah, I thought that was a good show title. We're just getting started.
I have to share the beautiful
Gulf Coast. Bill, that's beautiful. Wow.
This is just a stunning sunset that just timed itself perfectly for show 1001 here. I'm in Panama City Beach, Florida tonight. And just we had a rainy, beautiful day with lots of clouds, and people were like, "Oh, I'm sorry you were here with rain." I'm like, a rainy day at the beach is to me better than any day anywhere else. But I wanted to roll out the red carpet tonight and give a very warm welcome back to one of our dear friends of the show, one of the most respected voices in broadcast meteorology, Tom freaking Skilling. Tom, thank you so much for sending that wonderful congratulatory video for our 1000th episode. It meant the world to us. We got it during the show. I got to hold it up to the microphone and play it, and it meant the world to us. And we're so thrilled to have you here for episode 1001. But before we get started, tell us how retirement's treating you. From what we've been hearing, it sounds like you're as busy and more passionate than ever.
It's interesting, Tim. I kind of wondered. I was something of a workaholic. I'd start at 8 in the morning and get done 11 o'clock at night, and that was my normal day. And I had fun. I mean, I enjoyed it. I got tired of the traffic fighting that here in Chicago toward the end. But I'll tell you something. I told the young people in our office that they are probably witnessing one of the most exciting eras in meteorology. I mean, all of us can testify to that. What we've seen happen in the last 50 to 75 years is just stunning. I mean, when I started, you didn't have real-time operational satellite imagery. You didn't have access to Doppler radar. We had none of the modeling stuff. That was just starting to come out. And I remember Louis Uccellini, we were up at the University of Wisconsin. Louis was finishing his doctorate at the time up there. And a group of us, we called ourselves the Fax Rats, would gather on the 14th floor of the Space Science and Engineering building whenever a storm was coming in, because we were all, anxious to watch nature put one of these snowstorms together. So I was there with all these grad students, Louis Uccellini, Russ Schneider, Tom Carl. It's like Dave Barber would show up at times. And here I am, this lowly undergrad, wondering what these guys who really knew what they were doing were looking at. And it was interesting. We'd all take turns. Somebody would plot a thermodynamic diagram. Somebody else would do 850 to 700 millibar thicknesses and 850 to 1,000 millibar thicknesses when we were trying to decide where the rain snow line was going to be. It was fun. But Louis was always there, and I I learned so much from him. And I remember, I was sitting in my office one day back in 2013. The phone rings in the evening, and this voice comes on, and we did those Fermilab tornado severe storm seminars that we talked about before for the public. It was amazing the number of people would show up each spring, and we brought a who's who of veritable who's who of the severe weather research and forecast community through those sessions. Worked closely with our weather service office here, had Ted Fujita in, and the list goes on. And Louis would come in for that regularly. But before he had ascended to the top position, the phone rang one night in my office, and this voice comes on and says, "How'd you like the head of the National Weather Service to show up as a speaker at your Fermilab tornado seminar over in Batavia?" And I didn't know. I said, the head of the Weather Service? And he said, "Oh, yeah." I said, "Well, I'd love that." I said, "Who is this?" And he said, "Tom, this is Louis." And I said, "Louis, for God's sake." And he said, "You can't tell anybody, but I had to call you and tell you at 1 o'clock tomorrow, I'm going to be named director of the National Weather Service." Well, Louis was one of those unique people that could straddle the line between research and operational. He loved and respected operational synopticians, people who did synoptic meteorology, and he's a remarkable and brilliant dynamicist. And my God, the work he's done on jet stream structure, on eastern snowstorms, on gravity waves, is just amazing. And all I could think was, when he was named director of the Weather Service, here's a guy from the research sector that loves and really respects the operational end of the profession. And he's going to facilitate a lot of transfer of knowledge from the research end of our profession into the synoptic end. And that's exactly what happened. He was a really dynamic and wonderful choice as director of the Weather Service, as well as being a heck of a friend. So I'm glad Louis is here tonight with us, because he is a remarkable meteorologist, as are all of you. So it's really fun to be here with you.
I'm glad I showed up early.
Louis bicycled over to my back of the radio station office one day, and I said, "Louis," I said, "we ought to start a private consulting firm," knowing this was never going to happen. And I remember Louis said to me, "Tom, my in-laws are academics." Louis's wife's, it turned out Louis stayed in the same dormitory that I did. We didn't know that till years later. But he met his wife at the Commons across from our Susie, across from Tripp Hall. And it turns out, Louis, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but Susie, your wife's, your father-in-law was head of the medicine department, right? Up in the medical department up at the University of Wisconsin, right? I didn't know that at the time.
Yeah. We better get off this, but yes, he was dean of the medical school. And yeah, I used to bicycle out to the radio and TV studio just to see what it was like. And after watching these guys get cut from 1.5 minutes to a minute, on the fly, I said, I want nothing to do with this business.
Yeah. Louis, thank heavens for the profession. You did what you did, because I'm telling you something. You contributed so mightily to this field. And it's just amazing. You did us all a service by going in the direction you went. No question about it.
Yeah, and Louis, there's nobody will cut you off tonight, so we can go till midnight. So, Kim, now Kim, you got to look in the chat, because you got to say what you just said and cue Tom to do what he has to do next. So you take it away.
All right. Well, I will tee things off by just saying this crew we have assembled tonight is unbelievable. I think it's unparalleled, and possibly uncontrollable. So my fear is that this is going to shatter, simply shatter, because of the weight of the personality that is present here. And with that, I will pass the baton over. I think I will quickly say, on behalf of all the folks here assembled who have a current Weather Service affiliation, we're We're here as sort of a quiet support and able to answer any science-based questions that may be relevant. But of course, our presence here isn't to be construed as any sort of activism. We're just here to support our colleagues and just be present to this. We've got to be here.
Yes.
We do this every night at 7:00. So this is just our Monday night absolution for sure. So Tom, you got to go around the table and introduce your friends that you brought along. So that is your job, and you just need to be through by 9:00. So that's okay.
Okay, Tom.
I know.
Good luck,
Bill. You may be sorry you passed this on to me here, but
I can stay up all night. I've got a balcony seat in the Gulf of Mexico, and this is I'm in heaven.
There you go. Well, joining us here as well is a friend and colleague, Paul Daly, who was retired meteorologist in charge of the National Weather Service office here in Chicago. We assembled a group. We had a chance to do the Chicago Tribune weather page. And Paul was the first guy, when I found out we had a crack at doing that from the WGN weather office, I called Paul, who was MIC of the meteorologist in charge of the Chicago office. I said, Paul, you interview more people than I do. Who would you consider good for us to bring into this whole enterprise? He said, look, there are 4 of us ready to retire. I'll be over tomorrow. And so he came over, and the rest is history. We had an amazing group, and what fun it was. You know, we had all worked together on projects. I would go over to the office and interview Paul and his colleagues on all manner of weather-related stories. But to have us all under the same roof was really a lot of fun. And Paul is a remarkable meteorologist. I'll tell you, there's quite a history there. Do you know that he is a product of Purdue University, master's degree there, had studied at Rutgers and at the University of Wisconsin. He entered the National Weather Service in '62. He was Pennsylvania state climatologist, lead forecaster, Indianapolis, Des Moines, Central Region Chief of Operations in Kansas City, and MIC at Cincinnati, and also in Chicago from 1990 to 2002. Paul had the misfortune of joining the office here 3 weeks before the Plainfield tornado. And that was a terrible tragedy in our area. And boy, I'll tell you one thing, it moved up the installation of the WSR 88Ds by 1.5 years or something, didn't it, Paul? I mean,
that's right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Paul, do you know our most deadly weather disaster in Chicago? In fact, our most deadly natural disaster was a heat wave in July of 1995. We had a week of 100-degree temperatures. It never got below 80 at night, and more than 700 people perished in that. At the time, we knew heat was dangerous, but we didn't know the point at which people died. So the Daley administration, Mayor Daley, called upon the meteorological community to get involved, Paul in particular, and he joined efforts with John Wilhelm, who was health commissioner, and the two of them poured through morbidity and mortality data and established what the meteorological conditions were at which people started dying. And this laid the predicate for where we are now. When we see heat coming, the city opens cooling shelters. The media gets involved in telling people to keep your eye on the elderly or anybody living by themselves, and the city will transport people to cooling centers. Paul's work has literally been copied by cities all across the country who deal with heat, and it really did an amazing job. And he's so humble about this, but I mean, I think that was a heck of an accomplishment and a testament to how important our local National Weather Service offices are and the relationship they develop with our politicians, our first responders, and emergency government people. I mean, these are relationships we want to preserve. And with the talk of cuts and all and personnel and all, we've got to be aware of the fact this could affect our warnings and these relationships that lead to the kind of proactive response to disasters, which I know was a theme of Louis' term at the Weather Service, getting in touch with first responders and interacting with them directly so that they could anticipate dealing with hurricane strikes and wildfires like what we saw in Los Angeles and all. Paul is amazing. And we also have Victor Gensini, but I don't know that Victor is here yet. And I sent him a link, but I hope he shows up.
He's here. He's here.
He's here.
He is in the room.
You're
In the
Victor.
house.
I don't know. I might
He's in
just
position
rather
number
be
11 down there.
I think I'd rather be a fly on the wall for this episode.
Oh,
Oh no.
I'd
Victor.
pay good
I'm
money.
here.
to
There
be
he
Tom.
is.
I'm here.
There he
Better
is.
late than never. Yeah, it's great to see you.
Victor is, as all of us know, I mean, has done some really groundbreaking work in the severe weather arena. And in fact, will had a $11 million and National Science Foundation study on hail, which is a damaging severe weather phenomenon, as we all know. But Victor's also done some incredible work. That there it is, right there. And this will involve scientists. Victor is a professor of meteorology at NIU, and we're putting together a piece on the cuts at the Weather Service in NOAA. And I asked Victor if we could come out and visit with him. And he had me speak to his synoptic meteorology class. Young people are coming along. So we'll hear more from Victor as the night goes on. And I think Don Wubbles is with us. Don is is he here, guys, yet? Don
I have not
I
seen
don't
Don.
see Don.
Okay. Well, he'll be coming. Don is a Nobel Prize winning climate researcher. He was one of the young scientists who established the connection between chlorofluorocarbon propellants and the ozone hole and the damage to our stratospheric ozone layer. He not only identified the chemicals and aerosols that were culprits, but he came up with substitute suggestions, which have since been employed by refrigeration folks, and of course the Montreal Protocol was passed in 1987 that banned the use of chlorofluorocarbon propellants in our aerosol cans internationally. And as a result of that effort, our ozone layer is healing. So Don will be here later, and I'm sure we'll have much to say. He's working on a big sustainability conference. It's going to be held. It's an international affair, organized by the University of Illinois, his school, and that will be in June this year. And we're going to look at how we can build cities and communities in a more sustainable way. So some good people here. Really interesting. Bill, does that run down?
You couldn't have brought a better panel,
Yeah.
Tom. And Tom, you recently put a podcast together where some of y'all got together. What was that like?
Here's what happened. This is interesting. I read the New York Times, and I saw a quote from Louis. And Louis and I keep in touch from time to time. And Louis had talked about the cuts, and he said how cruel they were to the young people coming into the field and those in our weather service who are wondering about their employment. And so I sent Louis a note. I said, Louis, I'm watching what's going on, and I'm really concerned about it. And he wrote me back, and he said, it's funny you contacted me. He was contacted by our afternoon drive radio host on WGN Radio, Lisa Dent. Lisa is the wife of a farmer. They have a farm. She originates her show that airs in the afternoon drive period here in Chicago from her farm on some days out in west central Illinois. But anyway, she said she invited Louis to come on, and Louis said, look, I'd like to do it with a panel. So we brought Ed Fenelon, retired MIC from the Chicago office, and Don Wubbles. We brought Don in, and Louis asked that I be brought in on it. And we talked on the radio about what was going on in the Weather Service. And we got done with it. And Lisa said, look, there's so much more to cover. Can we do a podcast? Because then we won't be interrupted by commercials. So we sat down, and Louis joined us on the phone the first time, but he said, look, I could fly in, and I had some frequent flyer miles. I said, Louis, look, if you're willing to come in, I've got frequent flyer miles. We'll get you in here. So he came over here to my place here on the north side of Chicago. We interviewed for a TV piece we're doing, and then Ubered down to the radio station downtown, did the podcast, which runs an hour and a half, grabbed a little lunch, went back up and went back on the radio and afternoon drive and talked more about what's going on, and had quite a discussion about that and why we're concerned about what's happening with our our weather service, which strikes me as a very lean, mean organization. And I thought it important to get it out to the public that if the concern is overstaffing or anything like that, you've got the wrong agency if you're concerned about the weather service falling into that category. And also, I'm concerned about, talk of privatization, because there is no private entity that can take over the duties of the National Weather Service. Nobody could run a satellite system, Doppler radar sites, observation sites, buoys, tsunami warning work, and solar work for geomagnetic storms and all. I mean, and let alone hurricanes and tornadoes and all. We've got to keep this warning system alive, properly funded and staffed, and vibrant, and talking to our local first responders and all the rest. And that was a message we could put out on the radio and our podcast. And I put the first mention of the cuts on social media, and I wondered what the response would be. It's been stunning. People cannot believe what's going on. And, it reflects the high regard in which the Weather Service is held. The Weather Service has always come in as one of the top, most respected, if not the top, most respected federal agencies. People know about the Weather Service. They receive the products that the Weather Service generates. Every piece of weather information in this country has its origins with our National Weather Service. And so it's important we inform the public, the taxpayers, how, what's going on with the Weather Service, because we want to preserve this. So anyway, that bill in short is what we talked about, and wanted to get Victor's take on how young people are responding. Many of the comments that came in on social media were from parents who had young people studying meteorology and wanting to go, as all of us have, into a career in this field, dreamed about it our whole lives. And they're worried about whether the jobs will be there in light of these cuts that are going on, let alone a weather service that's alive and functioning properly. So that's what we've been trying to do.
So John Gordon, you had a question. So you've just retired from this organization, and of course you were a huge part of a very small corner of the National Weather Service, but a big part of in every area that you touched, why it was so respected. And students are such a huge part of what you love. So why don't you ask your question and then pivot, to Victor, John, and keep this conversation going.
Yeah, Tom, I mean, they paid my bills for 40 years, and I loved working for the Weather Service. I mean, that's just the God's truth. I mean, I always felt you're doing your hobby. Most people don't know that we do the aviation when you fly the TAFs. We don't know the fire weather, the climate, the hydro. The new thing, Tom, that you is the FIM, flood inundation mapping, which is water in a map. James, you're going to love it when you start seeing this. It is unbelievable.
Awesome.
What you can do with this. And I want this conversation to go. But Tom, I got to ask you a weather question. I got you here, okay?
Yeah.
So people used to say, "Do you take a lunch?" I said, "Only to watch Skilling." So before WGN screwed me and went to WGN America,
right?
I used to watch you every day.
How about that?
That was my lunch.
So, John, the response to that is you're the one.
Yeah. So Tom, what was the most minutes they ever gave you? I mean, most of them get 2 to 3 minutes. What did you get? Tell the truth right now.
I can't wait to hear the answer to this.
I know. James,
they didn't give him time. He took time.
He took time. What was your routine?
I'll bet I got 7 minutes, which is unheard of in our line of work, and it's amazing because like all of us in our business, we were always criticized for the time we took. The joke over at the station, some of the reporters have actually done bits where when the weather starts on our show and I'm doing the weather, they walk down the hall or over to the Starbucks and get a cup of coffee and then come back again, because it'll go on long enough they can do that, So, but, the time we put it to good use, and it was amazing. When I started, the news consultants would come in and say, "Oh, you're too technical. You use terms like jet stream and dew point, and you scare people." And when I retired, the thing you heard about from people was what we liked about your show is the depth in which to which you went in describing the weather, and they weren't offended by it at all. I used to say to the consultants, as a young kid who knew that they had my career in their hands, that you underestimate the audience. The audience is way ahead of you, and they are fascinated by the weather. James, look what you do with severe weather coverage. The lives that you've saved through your years of work. You're an icon for your work in severe weather coverage. It's not only
but hey, John Gordon, I'm like you. I would watch Tom Skilling every minute I could. You learn from this guy. His content was second to none. His communication skill, the whole package was. He is the gold standard if you want to do what we've done. So, John Gordon, I'm in there with you. If I had a lunch break, I'm going to go watch Skilling on that midday newscast.
You are so nice. Hey, can I tell you something? When I was up at school at Wisconsin, Louis was doing work on jet streaks. We called them jet cores in those days. And I thought, wow, this is really insightful. And so when we were on the satellite, Louis was down on some business in Central America.
It was in Costa Rica.
The GN feed going into a little restaurant, right, Louis? And you said, he's got jet cores on his upper air map, on the television show.
I spent all day getting down to Costa Rica for a WMO training session on extratropical meteorology.
Yeah.
I was tired. I was beat. I lay down. I started channel surfing. WGN pops up. Tom pops up. And he's got indirect and direct transfer circulations, jet streaks, contributing to potential snow. And he went on for about 5 minutes just on the jets. And I said, I cannot believe what I'm seeing here. I just couldn't believe it.
Louis, I used to walk around and I'd visit John Coleman here before John kind of went off the rails on the climate change issue. But I tell you, I love John. I mean, what he did to visualize weather was way ahead of its time. And I would bring upper air maps. I'd say, look at this, John. There are jet cores here. He said, you and your jet cores. And I said, don't you look at jet cores? And he said, and I would tell him about what Louis told us about it, and it made such sense. And I noticed when Louis took over at NSEP, at NMC, the discussions coming out would talk about left front exit region of the jetmax or the right rear entrance region, and they would talk about this on the QPF discussions and all. And I thought, there's Louis. He's talking in the office and all, and saying, "Hey, pay attention to this." It gave you an insight into the vertical motion fields that was second to none, and very helpful.
All right, Kim, you say what you were going to say, and then back to John Gordon to bring in Victor.
All right. So I just want to add really quickly. I grew up in the Chicago suburbs, Tom. So I grew up watching you, but before you said that you got harassed about bringing up the jet cores and the jet stream generally. I was 8 years old and I knew what the jet stream was, and I remember going, "Oh, that makes sense." I mean, I didn't know the dynamics, but it was something that I could train myself to understand and recognize patterns. And I've always wondered, there's almost a disproportionate share of people in our field who are around my age who are from the Chicago suburbs. It's almost a joke. I can't help but wonder if it's all the public education you did, because you believed people were curious. You believed that they could learn. That's a refrain I come back to on this show all the time. People are curious. They want to learn. Thank you for the service that you provided to all of us. And I mean, I have to believe that some piece of me is here because of what you did. And I'm gonna pass this on. I want to introduce Vic, but Louis, I can't. You've raised your hand. I can't not.
I have to. I want to double down on what you just said with respect to a young person being influenced by a television meteorologist. Tom and I compared notes. I grew up on Long Island. He grew up in New Jersey.
Yeah,
we watched the same. We watched Tex Antoine and Gloria Ocon, and both of those people spend time. We're talking we're talking early 1960s.
Yeah.
The first time I heard about numerical models was Tex Antoine.
That's something.
Right? And I'm a 12-year-old kid wondering, how the hell can you get this out of a computer? So now I got this locked into my head, besides watching wind changes on Long Island and knowing when the rain is going to hit after thinking it wasn't going to change to rain, right? It was amazing. We were influenced by the same meteorologist, and we both dialed weather 61212.
Yes.
Ad nauseum. With the one phone, one rotary phone in the house.
Yeah.
So it does make a difference. And we were talking about the younger people, that are now suffering this termination.
Yes. Yeah.
And then the younger people coming up through the classrooms, which is where Vic, I think will allude to.
Yes.
This is where the seeds are planted. In this field, and it's still true. It's still absolutely true. So, and what they're watching, I can, what I'm hearing back from younger folks, is there a future in meteorology? Is there a future for anybody? I mean, it's like the way the young and the new employees are being mishandled, in my opinion. So.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to get to this discussion. It's going to be so great. Sorry for our listening audience that this introduction was just going to take a hot minute, but the people who are true weather fans are loving every minute of this, so I don't feel so bad. But I will bring in Dr. Victor Gensini, who I've had the pleasure of knowing since he was an undergrad. I was a grad student through Norman doing his research experience for undergraduates, an NSF funded program which also we should mention is under threat right now. The pipeline Vic and I both came up through as undergrads, but Vic, as was alluded to earlier, a very brilliant researcher and faculty member, I believe recently tenured as well. Vic,
full professor, actually.
Full
Moved
professor?
on down the road. So yeah.
Heck yeah. All right. Well, you can, sing
kind of a big deal.
And I'll tell you, Kim, a couple of things. Number one, the REU cancellation. I actually just got an email from a student with an REU cancellation, straight up not going to get that opportunity this summer. And to your comment about all of the individuals in the Chicagoland region being influenced by Skilling, that's exactly why we offered him an honorary doctorate. And I wouldn't even say offered, he earned it. We've had so many students over the years intern with Skilling, intern at our local National Weather Service offices. It's unbelievable, I think, how many people originate in the meteorology career out of sort of the Chicagoland region. So bravo to Tom and all the others in the Chicagoland region for that.
Thank you, Vic.
Yeah, this has been a tough period, teaching synoptic meteorology and walking in. We have 85 undergraduates in our program. James has been to our program. Tom was in our synoptic class a couple of weeks ago. Louis been up in this region to see some of our feeder programs. These students want to go into public service. I would say maybe half, 35, 50% of them on an average year want to go into the National Weather Service, into public service. And they ask me, daily, am I going to get that opportunity? Are these opportunities going to be there? And you don't have an answer for them, right? And you look at the reductions in force that are happening. You look at last Thursday, we're losing 2 upper air observations permanently at Omaha and Rapid City, and another 6 locations are going to go down to 1 balloon per day. That was just news on Thursday that came out of a PNS. I have students that would go launch those balloons for free.
Right.
Yeah. Just to get an internship.
Sure.
So, and it's not like we're citing, we don't have the budget, we don't have the helium. It's a staffing shortage. And to me, that is absolutely unconscionable in this day and age when we have all of these brilliant minds that are coming up. I know a lot. In fact, a lot of NIU alum are in the weather service at WFOs across the country. I probably know half of the Sioux by name. And they tell me there's no way I would have gotten a job in the weather service with some of the talent and skill sets that these students have coming up through our university programs. And they're going to go to the private sector, right? They're going to go other locations. They're not going to choose public service when they see their friends and their family members getting cut because of probationary status or whatever those reasons might be, right? And I think it's now time for us to stand up, and especially those of us who are not in the weather service and can sort of say with a very loud and clear voice, this is not the correct path forward if we want a strong and viable National Weather Service, which is the envy of the world. So I think I'll stop there.
Well, you know, Victor,
Yeah.
did you see in the Washington Post today, there was an article about how Europeans are thrilled. They figure they're going to grab our scientists from in all disciplines and see if they can't attract them over to Europe. There's going to be a brain drain. And you know, once you knock Humpty Dumpty off the wall and break it, with our weather service, how do you put that back together again? The collective expertise that resides within our weather service is invaluable. It just can't be replaced overnight. So
Yeah, and I just want to mention that this is probably just the beginning. Let's not forget, you know, the handwriting's been on the wall for some time, but the reduction in balloons, the reduction in staffing, you know, this may just be the beginning, and I think we all need to be aware and brace for that.
do you know,
Yeah,
last
so
night
Victor,
I talked to Jason Levitt, who works in the environment EMC, and Victor, you were telling me you had just taken a plane in and had friends out there. Jason was a 12-year-old who wrote me and said, "I love the weather. Can I come over and see you?" So he visited. Later, he went to work on the CAPS program. Developing. That was one of our first storm scale convection allowing models. And he's since moved on from that to EMC. And I was asking him, he said 9 people have been let go in the Environmental Modeling Center. And Louis has made the point right along that numerical modeling, the computer modeling of the atmosphere, Louis says, is one of the top 10 achievements of science in the 20th century, right up there with the space program, computer technology, penicillin, the medicines. Louis could talk more about that. But I asked Jason, though, last night, I said, what will happen to the accuracy of our models when we start losing all these balloon observations? He said it's hard to quantify it because these models are so complex, but it can't help. We're going to wonder when these models bust on some major weather situation, whether or not it was not having proper data ingested because the balloon data is missing. It's outrageous, just crazy.
Yeah, I talked to a reporter at the Chicago Tribune today, and they were asking about the importance of observations in weather forecasts. And we all know this. We would all agree it's the most important fundamental step. We can't, right, simulate the future without time t equals 0. And I sort of equated it to this idea of you're going to the doctor's office and they're going to take some observations of you, but maybe they're not going to take your blood pressure this time.
Right.
Maybe you don't step on the scale this time, and it may not matter, right? But in some cases, maybe not having that blood pressure observation or that weight or height observation is a big deal. And quantifying that, you know, there was a monthly weather review paper years ago that demonstrated that they did sort of a data denial experiment, right? Where we can run models with and without observations, and forecasts are degraded without those types of observations. So this is also a big deal, and you know, not heading in the right direction. I think Louis can certainly.
Yeah, it's interesting that there's always been this view. Well, first of all, every observing system has its strengths, and they all have their weaknesses. And what we learned from the 80s and 90s experience, and you know, as the satellite data was starting to come in, and then other observations now, and as we went to Earth system framework, you get the ocean data in, you get the land data in. You got to have it all. You have to have all of this. It's remarkable that the radiosonde holds its own. So there's all kinds of ways of, and the reason is actually pretty simple why it's so important. Well, there are actually 2 reasons. It's the only observing system that takes independent measures of wind, temperature, and moisture at the same place in the same time. Okay? Satellites don't take temperature measurements. They measure upwelling radiances, and then you derive, right? And there are biases involved in all of that aspects, and you get layer averages. You don't get individual. So the radiosonde, the other advantage is the vertical resolution. So it turns out when they do these value studies, especially if you have variational analysis that it runs through for initializing models, you can go back and see which observations are giving you the value of the positive forecast. And then they rate them. You know, we got like 40 kinds of satellites in there. You got lots of data. Radiosondes always wind up in the top 5. Why? Wow. The main reason is not only its strengths, the vertical resolution, independent measures, no bias, right? So these other observing systems, like ACARS, used to have this warm bias and all that. It was corrected within the initialization, the data assimilation initialization by the radiosonde. The other one is the radio occultation. Will give you unbiased temperature measurements. Very important for the upper atmosphere. Okay, so those data sets. Remember when we were missing all the Alaskan data sets?
Yes.
And the models were crashing on major. We got those automated sounding systems put up there in Alaska, and so they don't have to be out there every day. You can do those are breaking down. By the way, that whole infrastructure is also under stress during this period. So it starts adding up, and it's sort of like everything in meteorology is like a fabric. All right, you bring all these different kinds of observations together in the data assimilation scheme, and you get the magic happens, right? 5-day forecast, all the modeling systems now are above 0.90. But if you start disintegrating this, the thread starts pulling apart, right? You were seeing the same thing with the human factors in the forecast offices. They have to make decisions. They have to support the decision process now. It's written into their mission statement. Where's Flash? John, right? IDSS is in the mission statement now of the National Weather Service, which means the job doesn't end with the forecast and warning. It ends when you're connecting with the public safety officials, the emergency managers that make the decisions that save lives. Okay. All right. There's a fabric there. There's a training aspect there. There's a practice session over and over again that you no longer have time for because they've just taken the people out. Who mentioned the FIM, the flood mapping? Yeah, John. All right, 12 people lost in the water center. Many of those were the experts working on that problem. Okay, so this is a fabric that was working, and they took a hammer to it, and they did it on purpose. One last thing I'll say, if I get one last word in here, I found this book on my bookshelf. I remember reading it back like 2008, 9. It's 2008. It's from Thomas Frank, is the guy who wrote What's the Matter with Kansas? Remember that when that was going on and all that discussion? This is the wrecking crew, right? This is what conservatives do when they take over the government. And if you don't, this was written in 2008. So I got to the part 2, the saboteurs. The best public servants is the worst one. So the idea is if you got something that's working, you just obliterate it and you flood the zone. So you're doing it across different parts of the government. And then the whole idea is that if you want to recover from it, we got the private sector to do it. So they got another chapter in here from paranoia to privatopia. This was written in 2008. This is the playbook. They're following the playbook. So I am worried. I am worried about what is going on because I believed in the public service. It's why I went over from the research to the operations. I specifically wanted to go to the weather service. I think it's recoverable. There's going to be a lot of damage done, but I believe it's recoverable because I still believe in the 3 branches of government, and everything that we do in the weather service is authorized by law. So as long as we have that, as long as Congress is engaged, as long as the emergency management is relying on the weather service as they should, as is specified in the Weather Act, Title 4.5, should read it. I think that this is still recoverable, but this fabric is being pulled apart, and I think it is cruel. I think it's really cruel to the new people who move, put their kids into schools, starting their families and all that, and now they're called back, put on administrative leave, and they can't access their emails. So they're just in a holding pattern.
Can I just also add that this tearing apart of the public fabric is not popular? People red and blue across this country, or whatever, purple, they want a strong National Weather Service. They want James Spann and Tom Skilling on TV, utilizing National Weather Service offices with the best possible information. It is an unpopular, I think, target in the eyes of the general public.
I think they've touched the third rail. I think they're going to find that they blew it. going after the Weather Service, because based on the majority views and reactions I hear from people, people are not happy about this. They're surprised by it. Everybody's familiar with Weather Service products, and they want, when lightning is flashing at 11 o'clock at night and part of their neighborhood is being swept away by a tornado, they want people on duty that are telling them what's going on. And I think we're about ready to go into hurricane season. We've got tornado season already underway.
We got the fire year. Don't forget.
That's it. Look at Los Angeles. What happened in Lahaina out in Hawaii? I mean, these are horrible things. People they want people, professionals watching the store, minding the store 24/7. And here's the thing that really is amazing to me. The population, the number of employees, for those who think that, the Weather Service is overstaffed and the sign of waste and mismanagement, 4,200 people run all the duties of the National Weather Service 24/7, 365 days a year for every corner of this country. Louis, you point out that the Weather Service forecasts the weather from Guam and the Pacific to across the lower 48, down into the Atlantic waters off the East Coast. 4,200 people produce all the weather information we get for 330 million people. That does not sound like a wasteful enterprise to me at all. It sounds like it's a pretty lean, mean operation, and I think we must tell people that this is not wasteful. We really are. The Weather Service is an amazingly well-run, efficient, and lean operation, and we're getting a hell of a bang for our buck out of the National Weather Service.
Well, we're cutting out our future when we're taking these young people and the probationary employees. You know who they are? They're all the young people who had just entered the Weather Service. They're on probation for a year or 2 years or 3 years. And so they're cutting all those people out. That's our future. Those are our future lead forecasters. Those are our future hurricane and severe storm center forecasters. Those are our directors in the future. That's our future, and you're cutting it out now. These are all bright, young, sharp people. Think about it. Victor was just talking about the young students he's had. We've hired many, many students out of Northern Illinois University at the forecast office in Chicago. And they've all been sharp people, and they've moved on to other offices and been promoted into better positions, higher positions. But when they came in the door, we were learning from them in many cases. Guys that have been forecasting for years. Hey, I'm used to doing it this way. But the young guy comes in and he says, hey, what if you try this? And you look at it and you say, my gosh, I've been looking and working one way all these years, and all of a sudden this young guy comes in and points something out to me that really rings a bell, So we're losing that when we don't hire these new people. And think about it, the Weather Service is like other federal offices. They're telling us we have to fire or lose 4 people before we can hire one again. Okay, so you've got to lose 4 people before you can even hire one. Okay, then after you've hired that one, you've got to lose another 4 people before you can hire another person. That means you can be down 7 people pretty fast. 7 people is a quarter or more of your operation. They're stripping the operation. So this is something that is not just something slight. This is huge, a huge loss to us, not only in numbers, but in enthusiasm and in knowledge. This hurts. There's no question about it. And it hurts right away, and it's going to really hurt 2 or 3 years down the road.
And 20 and 30 years down the road, Paul. And
yes, that's right.
You said the word that scares me, Tom, and that's brain drain. And Louis brought it up, because I talked to Harold Brooks, many, many years ago.
Yes.
And Harold said to me, I asked Harold, I said, why did I have to study German, when I was at Florida State, studying meteorology? And he said, Bill, everything, was done in German, because the United States was not very active in meteorology in the early 20th century. And then they suddenly kind of went away. And a lot of that was because of the brain drain that happened in the 1930s. And I'm petrified that we could have what you said there. I hadn't even considered. Obviously, the other things we talked about are concerning. But if we lose our scientists, our young scientists that are coming up, that really petrifies me. And so Louis, speak to that for a second, and John, Tom, you speak to it too, and Paul and Victor, everybody that's here, that scares me.
Yeah, I want to really double down on this. When you look at meteorology and you look at the Weather Service, the two things to keep in mind. First of all, NOAA/Weather Service is the only agency in the entire federal government that has the words forecast or prediction in its mission statement. And other agencies have run away from that in our entire career. I mean, the oceanography community, when Tom and I were at the University of Wisconsin, hadn't even started modeling yet. They didn't think it was going to work. Okay. So think about the people who invested their time post-World War II and the battle they were against the old timers who thought all this was magic stuff that wasn't going to work. All right. It took 30 years before there was any credibility. It was a 30-year effort in the use of satellite data, right? That NASA joined in. I went to the NASA Goddard Laboratory for Atmospheric Sciences, a new lab, and was on the front end of work that was being done at NASA. But it took, you can't give something unless there's something to somebody to receive, okay? So we had this 30-year commitment to making these kinds of things work. And now we're sort of blowing up the entry-level meteorologists coming into the organization, whether it's on the front lines of the local forecast office in the national centers or in the development areas. So that's one aspect of this. The other is, think about NOAA and what they contribute to this enterprise. The satellites are actually developed between NESDIS and NASA and run by NESDIS. And NESDIS has the information unit down in Asheville to try to store all this data. All of my research on jet streaks and gravity waves started with operational data, and I had to order data from Asheville to publish papers on gravity waves, which was very controversial. I lost half my hair with that, and the other half I lost with jet streaks. Okay, so Asheville is threatened to be closed down, right? That's part of NESDIS. You look at the coastal areas, there are 2 orders of magnitude less observations the minute you go onto the coast and beyond versus what you have over the land. Think of what NOS is doing with the IUS program to try to bring not only the data in, but bring it in real time through the buoy center so that it can be used operationally. Think of OAR in the hurricane research and the research down in NSSL where the radars were developed, right? Think about the labs out in Boulder, Colorado, and the work they're doing on the data assimilation effort to try to bring all this. I think the data assimilation is the magic area that needs to be focused on to quote unquote catch up to the Europeans, right? So this team NOAA approach, whether it's on the wet side of NOAA, the dry side, the research, it's all coming together. It's all come together from the modernization on. And it's really paid dividends. So this is all being threatened. So the research to operations, and the operations. And Tom, you mentioned Tom is like a stream of consciousness in the early part of this thing about, you can't do this with the private sector. Remember, he jumped in on that. So I'm a big fan of the private sector because we can't reach our mission without the emergency management community, without the academic community, and without the private sector. We can't forecast for individual stores that open their doors during tornado events out in the middle of the country, right? As an example. All of this is a fabric that's now being tugged and blown up in certain respects. So yeah, I'm worried about that whole spectrum of activities. It's a science-based service. It's physical science, it's social science to get people to react. All of this is all coming together, is being pulled apart, folks. And I am very concerned about it because public safety, it's been shown, is enhanced when the emergency management can get ahead of these storm systems, whether it's a fire situation, a tornado, all of them. And that's being put at risk, and that concerns me greatly.
Do you know something? We went out to Washington, Illinois, site of the latest occurring EF4 tornado in November of 2013 here in Illinois. This took out 1,100 homes, killed 3 people, injured 125. It struck during Sunday morning when people were in church. They found out about it with these. They had their phones go off as they were sitting in the pews or in the church, and they were moved expeditiously to safe rooms, which probably saved lives. The Mayor Manier of Washington, said that he had been called by the Lincoln National Weather Service office 3 days ahead of time, and that situation had been flagged. You guys, you're going to have to watch this coming Sunday because these storms are going to erupt, and these could be big ones. And he credits that with the saving the number of lives they did out of that. Almost $1 billion of damage done by that storm. There was a video shot of that. Somebody shot the squall line coming in out their front door, and you saw the clouds gathering over this beautiful subdivision. They kept the tape running, went down to the basement. It went dark because they were in the basement, but the audio, you could hear the house breaking up above. They then ascended up the steps. This all took place in seconds, and looked out what was left of the front door, and the whole neighborhood was gone. I put a stopwatch to it. That happened in 16 seconds. 16 seconds. They had 11 minutes advance warning, and they were at the ready because they had been informed by their forecast office in Lincoln. And this is just one example. I mean, there are examples like this all along. Imagine along the coastlines with hurricanes coming in. My God, Ian in Florida and all. And look what that did. And last year with Malta, 4 landfalls in Florida. And you've got major population centers that haven't even had a direct hit by a hurricane. It's just a matter of time before that happens. Do you know that our Weather Service office here in Chicago has surveyed every school, every hospital, every major thoroughfare? And when the Doppler radar shows a circulation coming across the city, we had one go form out in the Fox Valley 40 miles west of here, and it finally set down a tornado when it moved over the shoreline up by Loyola University here on the north side of the city. But in looking at the track that thing followed, it went across hospitals, schools, and the Tri-State Expressway in rush hour. Had that touched down, and it might have, but for sheer luck, it would have been catastrophic. And it's only a matter of time before that happens. We've got to keep the Weather Service on duty and fully staffed, and dealing with the amount of information, and people like Victor Gensini doing his research along with so many other research colleagues, so that we can further improve these forecasts, which, whether people believe it or not, are actually the most accurate weather forecasts we've ever produced in this country up till now. So it's just
yeah. You know what? Our research is impacted by the fact that we're losing upper air observations, right? And I think that's a really big. I want to just really quickly, when you're looking at the budget of the National Weather Service, and if you're going to look at this from an efficiency perspective of spending money, specifically the National Weather Service's budget is primarily personnel. Okay. So if we don't have young people coming in and filling these lower end GS roles, so for listeners, the federal government uses the general schedule, right? GS positions. In the Weather Service, GS 5, 7, 9, these are typically your lower level, entry level meteorology positions. If you don't have people coming in and taking those, then the warnings, we're moving into severe weather season, that overtime that is going to be used to fill the needs for warnings or launching upper air observations is going to be overtime GS 13s and 14s and people that are higher up on the payroll. It's going to end up not being a cost-effective way to kind of manage the small budget that you have. It's it's pretty disappointing. Not only from the investment in our young people, as Paul Daly, very clearly laid out, it's going to end up costing you just as much when a lot of these offices have overtime that are being used by the science and operations officer or the MIC or some of these higher, administrative positions. It's not cost effective.
No, Victor, and I think it could be argued it will be more expensive. You hear the word privatize thrown around, and look, I'm not disputing what Louis says. All Louis knows the private sector. Heck, I worked in the private sector. We used Weather Service data to do what I do as a television meteorologist, and so many other organizations do use Weather Service data. But think about it. If you eliminate the Weather Service and their collection capability on this, and refer to private organizations to relay Weather Service data instead of having it come out of the offices themselves, the taxpayer will have paid to collect the information and then pay a surcharge, if you will, to a private organization to repackage the information and then communicate it to the public. Where right now we're doing that quite efficiently with the system we've got in place. It's one of these cases where if it ain't broken, why are you trying to fix it? So you can see this actually costing more before it's all over.
So let's get back to upper air briefly here. So Victor brought up some of the ones like Rapid City stopping, but there was a bunch of them that are going to one a day. Some would drop the 12Z, some would drop the 0Z.
Yeah,
so
I have the
when
list. I have the list. Do you want the full list, John?
Well, I know it. I just wanted for our listeners to know.
Yes. So if our listeners, I have the P&S statement in front of me from Thursday. So these are the sites that are going down to one per day. We have Aberdeen, Grand Junction, Green Bay, Gaylord, North Platte, and Riverton. So a pretty significant chunk of the center part of the country. And again, that's on top of Omaha and Rapid City. Back to you, John.
And those are just central region. That's not the whole country. That came out of the central region.
Central region P&S, correct. Yeah.
Correct. So, and this is Louis. I know you know more than I do, but I flew with the Hurricane Hunters, the 53rd, which Tom Skilling went on a mission with us, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Awesome.
Tom freaking Skilling. Yeah,
that's right.
And,
awesome.
And we used to brief Congress that our data with the 53rd improved the forecast by 25%. Louis, if you lost all these upper air places, what is the quantifiable difference? I mean, do you have a number?
So no, I don't have a number in front of me, but I'll give you an example of how important this data is. So now, I don't know if you've noticed this, there are storms approaching the coastline of the United States, and there's still a wide spread in terms of the tracks. One of the programs we put in place during the time I was the NSTEP director, towards the end of that, and then Weather Service director, is to call special SONs so we'd have 6-hour SONs. And I would work with the Hurricane Center, to help, at least put my views on the table with respect to where we should look. Now they always had the last word. I just put in, but one of the areas that I was very intrigued in, and I got this from a chap named Ed Rogers when I was at Goddard Space Flight Center. He did a lot of work. Unfortunately, he died young. I don't know how much he got published, but these storms in the Pacific going east to west, and then when the troughs were in the mid-latitude areas, when the trough went by, there were times that they were captured or they would accelerate north and then be left behind and go. It was clear that there was things going on in the extratropical latitudes that were influencing the tracks of those storms. So we used to call for 6-hourly soundings across the northern Midwest for storms heading towards Florida. And whether it was Dorian or some of the other storms that really got locked in along the coast, that started happening in the prediction realm when we started launching more of those SONs in the northern Midwest. Okay. So what happens now if you're only doing one a day rather than 4 a day? And you can't, you got to have the people to do this, right? And if you don't have the people, you're not going to get 4 a day. And so this was a program we used to have, the middle part of the country and then the east coast. And then, and it was clear that we were getting better track forecasts when we had more radiosondes being launched over the United States, influencing the troughs or the westerly flow across the United States. That was an important factor in where that storm would then turn, either north or northeast. So these kinds of things are put at risk. Let's put it that way. And we're coming up to the hurricane season. And you got the problem with the aircraft. John, I didn't know you were in those flights. I got to meet him. By the way, John Gordon was on the strategic team that I was named the leader of, but I spent more time listening to people like John Gordon and others that were on that team that came up with Weather Ready Nation. And we called it, I think, Decision Support Services. We didn't have the I in it in that strategic plan. But when I came in 2013, the first thing I told us, I said, we got vision, plan, follow through. I said, we got a vision and a plan. It's called Weather Ready Nation. I think I could hear John cheering all the way from the middle part of the country. He was doing that. And that's what we used. That's what we used in the 9 years that I was the director of the Weather Service to get that through. And, all of this is pulled together. It's just one part. What we just described with the radiosondes, now in a 6-hour cycle or hourly cycles of our numerical models. Remember, we used to live by the 12-hour cycle. We had people like Tom Skilling at 9 o'clock using the 12Z model runs before we were able to do this, and releasing the model data. All of this is being supported, sustained by people, right? And we're losing them. Oh, one other thing is another big pool of hires that we have now are vets. We really worked on hiring more vets coming out. And it's not just, okay, yeah, they're good with technology and all. No. These folks are forecasting. We got them onto the forecasting ranks as well. So that's another pool that just got, quote unquote, terminated, right? Because they're new, So I just wanted to emphasize that too. It's the young people coming out of the university. It's the vets. And we're hiring people out of the private sector whose dream has always been to work in the Weather Service. And they bring a view and a perspective into the Weather Service, knowing how the private sector works and what's important and all that. So I just wanted to emphasize that as well. But this thing with the hurricanes is really a great case study for how all of this comes together days in advance. As emergency managers to start the whole process at day 5 before, so everything's important. You can't subtract anything out and expect this fabric to hold its own when we're dealing with a system like that.
And Louis, there can't be, these eliminating these weather balloon launches, the radiosonde launches. These can't be huge amounts of money. I mean, it's not like we're saving billions of dollars or anything like that. My God.
It's the time in the office. It's what it takes. I mean, it's, you're setting up, you go out, you launch, you make sure everything is working. You just don't launch and, you got systems out there that have to be working. You have to make sure that the data receive and transmission thing is all, and then boom, you've got somebody, you got 2 people out there. Or 1 person out there, or even if you're pushing a button in Alaska to launch the automated systems, at some point you got to get up there and fill the tubes. Okay. Yeah. It's time. And if you only got 1 person now on the desk and you got something, you remember when Ed was explaining the list of churches and schools and all this other stuff, somebody's paying attention to where that storm is being projected to influence. That takes time. It takes focus. In Oklahoma, they were dealing with severe weather and fire at the same time. I visited Fort Camp Pueblo, Colorado, where they had a severe weather and fire situation going on at the same time. And they had 2 people. I don't know how they managed it, but this is where AWIPS finally came through, that I could see AWIPS was actually allowing these people to flip back and forth between. But what if both those persons had just been terminated? How do you deal with 2 of these things? The MIC can only do so much, right? The SUIT can only do so much. But this is what's going to be happening over the next 3 or 4 months. You're going to have severe weather and fire going on in the same place, the same time. And North Carolina and South Carolina is taking the brunt of the fire right now, right? Um, so you just can't pick your spots and say, oh, fires are out in the western part of the country. No, that doesn't work.
And you know, Louis, here's the thing. I think the average person thinks, oh, well, if we do something with the Weather Service, we'll have the Weather Channel take over or somebody like that. Where do they think the Weather Channel gets its information? Where do they think we get information? We're not equipped to take over this or run a satellite system or make sure the Doppler radars are up and operating. I mean, I told everybody these Doppler radar systems we work with, we have one at Romeoville here. They have 27-foot diameter dishes on top of a 100-foot high pedestal with a radome over it. You could stand 3 people on top of one another in the antennas of one of these Doppler radars. What do you think it takes to keep those things running and operating? And you've got to have a staff who's ready to come in and repair the stuff so that when the tornadoes start dipping from the skies, we're getting timely and operational Doppler data. And that's true of all these complex systems that we work with that analyze and help send and communicate data that we use all the time. There's no private enterprise that could take over all that. There are certain things that government has the scale and the ability to do that a private sector alone can't do. And I don't think people realize that.
So just one last Kim, one last thing here for your Oklahoma fans. Remember the Radar Operations Center was on the GSA list for having the lease, not signing the lease.
My office space, yep.
Yeah, that group is phenomenal. I mean, I've been down there. I was down there a couple of times, and they walked me through, and they set up 24/7 as we went through the service life extension program for the radars. But it turns out that they can get if you got eyes on this system, and there's a problem that the local office can't fix or solve, or they figure it out. Hey, you need this part, and get it there by the next morning. Get that radar up. All this was the system checks on all this stuff is mind-boggling. And we had it set up so that, you don't want the radar down for any period of time. When something happens, eyes on target, get it set. That was the Radar Operations Center. They also had the NOAA building I worked on the list as well, but I sense that's going to be okay. But all the data that the private sector gets goes through that building. So
yeah.
It's something that, again, this is an enterprise. This is an enterprise that works, and the public recognizes it. The Weather Service and is always on near or top of the list for public satisfaction now, and because they know it's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great thing to talk about a little bit more. The whole relationship among all of our sectors. So, Tom, you mentioned you're not just going to get stuff from your app, right?
No.
Like this is all data that comes from the Weather Service, and I don't think people really appreciate when we say data, just how vast that infrastructure is. Even today, there was an announcement made by the weather company, which had been part of like the Weather Channel. They have like a data arm that split off, but the weather company it had talked about how that lab in Boulder that Louis, you talked about, having all that work in data assimilation that they've done. The JEDI program that is taking huge leaps in data assimilation, weather company is going to use that to supercharge their own systems. So even the private sector, if they are providing a forecast service, it's on the back of all of the observations that are taken by the federal government and some of these huge investments in research that you're talking about, right? Like this is, can you guys talk a little bit more about our enterprise, the public, private, academic? I mean, we have folks here around our table who represent all of these. And I think something about what goes on in our field is really special. We have this very most well-honed, efficient machine that serves the needs of all of those folks, right?
Absolutely.
So one of my joys as the Weather Service director was also being the permanent rep for the World Meteorological Organization, which at the time I would report to the State Department because I wasn't there to represent the National Weather Service. I was there to represent this country. And the WMO has 147 member states. You know, the World Meteorological Organization was one of the first international organizations, and one of their first things they took on in the late 1940s was the Global Radiosonde Network. Why? Because the aviation world was emerging as a global enterprise. And guess what they needed to know about? Winds, okay, among other things. So that Radiosonde network, the 12-hourly Radiosonde network, is a global network that was set up essentially to support the aviation, the growing aviation industry. And then you got the modelers that come along. And they have to work on, you know, the mathematics of it. We all learn about that, but they also had to work from a computing point of view. So now you start getting computing companies generating. And it turns out in the 70s, you had Cray with the supercomputing, IBM and Cray. And they were alive, if the founders were alive, the things they would tell you is that there were two areas that drove the supercomputing. Meteorology was one, and the other one was NSA, was the code, you know, was tracking intelligence and stuff like that. Those were the two areas that drove the supercomputers. Then you start looking at, I've got to get this information out reliably in real time. And everybody remembers, you know, look, when I took over the Weather Service, I didn't know how much money we spent in dissemination. Dissemination was spread all over the place. We pulled it all together. It's a huge amount of money we were spending and not doing it very efficiently. It took time to get that built. People are very impatient, but it takes time, right? It's all private sector now, right? So the Slack came in, tested, we made it work. It got implemented right after I left, right? So you see this across the whole. I'm just using these examples because you see it across the observation portfolio, the central processing, which was computers. You see it in the dissemination. You see it in science to technology integration. You see it in the satellite world, right? So this is, I remember listening to, you know, people talk about what it was like doing the modeling and building up this enterprise in the 1950s and 60s. They called it an international Camelot, right? There was all this interaction going on. When I at the WMO towards, you know, before pre-COVID, I had more people from other countries come up to me and say, how the hell do you make that enterprise work? We were a big advocate of the public-private sector at the WMO. When we went to the executive council meetings or I always brought a different group from a different part of the private sector along with us so they could become familiar with the global aspect of it. Like AccuWeather, really at some point, AccuWeather announced they were actually making more money with their international business than they were with the national business, right? So we were fostering that. The enterprise was the most vibrant in the whole globe. And I had people coming up to me from other countries, Europe, Africa, Asia, Australia. How did you make this work? Right? Because there's a recognition that this whole aspect was absolutely essential for even the public sector to meet its mission. So they're gonna, you know, this thing kind of falls apart. It's like there's not going to be any white knights coming along, you know, saying, hey, you know, with all their armor on and all this, we're making, you know, we're going to take over. It won't work that way. It's going to come apart because
it's taken
the dependency.
It's taken years and years and years to build up this coordinated effort that we have now. Think of all the coordination we've done over the years with the state, with the local towns, the local cities, the city of Chicago in our case. Coordination, trying to make sure that when we disseminate a statement that has to go out now, it goes out now. And the TV stations and the radio stations, we coordinate with them. We've coordinated with the private and the public sector in order to have a system that really works. Yeah. And don't forget, We also work with the military. We work with the aviation industry. You know, you talk about our meteorologists at our stations. We also have guys that are called electronic technicians. And you know, you only have two of those on your station. If you're real lucky, you might have a young guy just coming in who will now be gone because he's probationary. So you have two technicians there, and you have a radar you have to take care of. You've got all your computer equipment inside the building there you have to take care of. You got your radio sound setups. And also think about at all the airports, there are observing stations, automatic observing stations, not people taking observations, but automatic stations. And who maintains those automatic weather stations? With visibility and temperatures and measuring how much hail is falling or thunder or lightning. Who is sensing? Who is taking care of that sensing equipment? It's our two technicians out at the weather office. And you know what? If you cut one of those technicians because he's a young guy, or you just have to cut automatically, you're down to one guy. And what if he gets sick? Or he decides he's going to be one of the guys that takes the early out and retires. You've got nobody there to maintain all that equipment, not only at your office, but at all the airports around the whole area. In Chicago, there's innumerable automatic observing systems set up. So those are just some other things you have to keep in mind. But we work not only just with the public, we work with the military, we work with the aviation industry. I tell you, it's a massive deal. And once these people are gone, like Louis says, they're gone. And how do you get that back?
No.
And Louis, you mentioned, and Paul alluded to it here, there's a lot of focus right now on aviation safety.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it seems like this is a very bad time to be degrading, the weather portion of what we're doing for our aviation industry. Do you see and do you fear major things coming in that arena that could further degrade safety there?
Actually, every time I mention aviation with Troy on the docket here, I'm afraid I can get ahead of my headlights pretty quickly. But especially in terms of weaknesses that are developing, because Troy had my number. Okay. So I would always find out from Troy. So I might want to pass this along. The point I would make, though, is that it's hard to say when the wheels come off the wagon. I can't foresee or exactly how that happens. It's a matter of increasing the probabilities that something like this could happen. That that something gets missed, or something breaks and doesn't get fixed in time, and then when something gets missed, there's finger pointing. Why did that happen? And so it's really hard, because there is a certain resilience. And I could tell you that I got to talk to meteorologists in a number of airlines, and they're just as dedicated to what they do as the weather service folks are. And they sleep in their offices at night sometimes too, right? I mean, so it's hard for me to make that, but there are things that you do have more complicated aspects, that there are rules that pilots have to follow before they take off in that plane, whether it's general aviation or the commercial sector. And it's something that really has weather at some key steps. And if something gets missed and they go down, that's it's, but I can't sit here and say, hey, I know that this is going to break at some point or that's going to break at some point. I just hope that when things get tough in those areas, that those voices are raised early on, and not when something happens. Right. And it's not a matter of being an alarmist. It's just being knowledgeable about, again, how all of these things are integrated together, and you can see when they're pulling apart. And that's the thing that concerns me, because that's what I think we're seeing now in the observing arena. And I'm afraid when there's 2 or 3 major storms going on, a real major outbreak, that things are going to get missed in the severe weather arena and fire weather arena as well. So, Troy, I hate to put you on the spot, but you're good at that anyway. So.
I have no opinion on this. But I will mention that James from Tulsa is a pilot, and some other folks that can hop in here as well. I'm particularly concerned when you saw, and especially what Paul said, when you saw the FAA, and this came prior to what we realized was going to happen related to after the election in the fall. But, you know, the FAA came close to shuttering the CWSUs back in the fall. In fact, they did it deliberately, as Ken Graham and I've talked about. They did it deliberately in the dark of the night to try to get the Weather Service not to realize what was going on. And I'll say that and let the FAA come after me. But that is one of the best deals in the world in the wake of Southern Flight 242 in the late 70s outside of Atlanta, Georgia, when we were looking at monochrome radars and air traffic controllers. Their thing is not weather. Their thing is air traffic control, and they do a damn good job for what they do. But they steered a plane into an area on black and white monochrome radars in the center in Atlanta, where the hail had caused the radar to rebound to show nothing. They sent Southern Flight 242 into a hail shaft where it crashed thereafter.
Wow.
And you know, the contractors that have come on, the Weather Service, as Louis, as you know, has had that contract for a while. I'm just worried what happens with that now. And I'm going to be careful what I say next, because I have friends in the NTSB, and increasingly, I'm being careful, increasingly I'm hearing that they're running across more weather stuff. And one of the biggest dangers, James and Tulsa step in here, one of the biggest dangers is in civil aviation, and related to this, not important in aviation meteorology at all, in thunderstorms. You know, this is big stuff. And so I think we have to look at it. I will tell you, just because I have to do this, just my duty to do this, I never quite agreed back in the mid 90s when the Inspector General, or OMB actually, I think Louis, stepped in and decided that weather observations were the responsibility of the FAA.
Yeah.
When they did that in the mid 90s, I've always thought the Weather Service should still, I mean, the Weather Service is the expertise in weather observations. The FAA is not.
Right.
They're not. The Weather Service knows weather. The FAA, they know air traffic control.
Hey, Troy, we lost the whole snow measurement through the mid 90s.
Oh, yeah.
Because they contracted the weather observations out, and these guys didn't want to stick a ruler in and figure out how much snow had come down. So we'd have a blizzard going and trying to get a reading on how much snow had accumulated, which is kind of important for the snow removal people and the operation of the city. That part of the data set is missing in that era.
That's one thing, Tom, too, that our snow climatology in this country, and it just sort of happened with everything. It's part of this process. I guarantee if the Weather Service are doing weather observations in this country directly, we would have good snow climatology. But so many first order climate stations now, there's no more snow climate, especially in Alaska. And I realized, Louis, that was a difficult thing when we used to have a bunch of WSOs up in Alaska, but of course with modernization, those began to shut down, and I understand that process. But no, you're exactly right. I can't tell you details, but I'm going to tell you the folks at the NTSB, a great group of people, and meteorologists. We've had Paul Suffren on this show with us before, do an amazing job. But I'm hearing a lot of things interesting weather-wise that they're having to go back and look at in relation, Paul, to some of the things you talked about with weather observations and so forth. And we're using the ASOSs. I think the ASOS is a good piece of equipment, but I think it needs a little augmentation and so forth. And if it's a bad day for that weather observer, last night we had hail at a climate at a service level ASOS last night at Austin Bergstrom International Airport. We had hail, and I'm looking at the OBMN. It gave me the ending and beginning time, but didn't give me the hail size. And so I picked up the phone and called because that's supposed to be part of the weather observation. I finally got it, but it never is part. It won't be part of the record. NCEI is not going to. They're not going to see it now, but at least we know for climatology purposes that it was GR 1/4. So, but this is all stuff that we've got to look at, and I agree so much. Paul said it so well. Louis said it so well. Victor said it so well. Folks, this is going to be tough to put back together. Humpty Dumpty, this thing is not going to be, some people say, well, we can always put this back together. No, it's going to be very difficult to do that.
Yeah. And do we have a clear idea? It's all being done without transparency. I mean, we even have a hard time figuring out who's being let go. You often get it from, inside information and what the methodology is about who you're letting go.
And then Tom, you find out you're let go, and the next day you're brought back in.
Yeah, I know.
I want to go back to something very important that was just said. Humpty Dumpty can be put back together, but the damage to the workforce development that is happening across all of our universities right now is something that you can't get back. And these are young students who are interested in the most applied STEM field there is, atmospheric science, who are literally saying, there's no room for me here, right? And they're choosing other career paths in proxy sciences, whether it's computer science or physics or something else, because their dream of going into public service in the National Weather Service is very bleak. And that's something that will take a long time to recover from.
First, let me tell you, this is so incredibly valuable for the perspective that you all are providing on this. My question, and Victor, you're really touching on it. The science of meteorology in nearly all aspects is probably close to Moore's law. We are exponentiating our knowledge of things. And I don't know, when you're talking about putting Humpty Dumpty back together again or getting the genie back in the bottle, how can we ever understand appropriately the damage this is doing to the exponential growth of knowledge and the science, not only from the natural course of the physical science getting better, but from some of these best and brightest not going into some of these fields that would have provided even bigger jumps in gains in knowledge. And it's just disheartening and heartbreaking and
unquantifiable, right? It's unquantifiable. Think about, we always talk when, for example, just use a large severe weather outbreak. We always count the casualties, right? The injuries, the fatalities. We can't count the number of people that were saved by that incredible, enterprise that we have. And it's going to be the same thing when it comes to students going into, potential students going into the workforce. And this will be an unquantifiable aspect that we may not ever really fully understand.
I mean, it's kind of a Potter Stewart definition. We'll know it when we see it, but by then it's way too late.
Yeah.
So Tom,
hey Victor, have you seen a noticeable change in the enrollment in students coming out of high school going into meteorology? Have you noticed a difference at all?
I think across the board, many university programs have seen maybe a slight decrease since, like, for example, the first Twisters movie came out. I think there was a peak in meteorology undergraduate enrollment if you're talking about the last couple of decades, in 2008 during the recession, when a lot of students were choosing to go to college. It really is geographically dependent, but we haven't seen any significant trends. If anything, here at NIU, it's been a slow increasing trend. But I do worry, when you're sitting down with that guidance counselor, you're sitting around the family table with your parents, and you're choosing between engineering and atmospheric science, which may be your first passion, that you maybe don't choose atmospheric science anymore. That is really disheartening to me, and I hope that that's not happening. And I want to make sure that everybody out there knows that there are other pathways, right, than the federal government. But
that's the thing. I want a lot of young people listen to this show, and I want you, while you're on the line here, to maybe just talk to that high school senior that loves weather. It's their passion. They love it. They live it every day. They can't wait to get to NIU under your watch and become a meteorologist. What can you tell them? Because it's been a lot of doomsday stuff. Everything we've said is valid tonight. There's horrific things going on, but give us a positive you can tell these young people.
Well, look, not only are there other career paths, but every storm has a beginning and an end. And it's not, under my perspective, I forecast this is not something that will last forever, right? And I think the damage may be, difficult to endure, and we may not know the lasting implications of what's occurring. But it's not like we're not going to have a National Weather Service in some capacity, even after this administration. So I think for those individuals out there that want to go into public service, those opportunities will be there. There are, again, are other ways to get involved. A digital content meteorologist, as you know, what you do, James. I mean, that TV might not be the wave of the future, but there are opportunities to inform the public, even if you're not in the National Weather Service, and you're going to disseminate information to the public. And I think just areas of basic applied science, research is going to continue, even though it may be slashed in terms of funding. There will be opportunities for those students. And so if you're really passionate about atmospheric science, don't shy away from thinking about going into public service. It just may look a little bit different here in the short term.
And that's what I told them. I was at Valpo this past weekend. You've got to follow your passion in life to be successful. If this is your thing, if you love weather, you think about it when you wake up, you think about it when you go to bed. Don't let this deter you from getting into this and following that. Work hard, learn something every day, have a servant's heart, and you'll be successful. Just don't let this be a total distraction. So I appreciate that. And again, I'm thankful, Victor, for what you're doing at NIU.
I tell my students right now, try to block out the noise, focus on your work, do well, right? Get your grades, get your letters of recommendation, and stay passionate. And it will eventually blow over. Let all the other folks that are in the field right now and are professionals worry about, making sure that we have a healthy National Weather Service going forward. But that's not something that they need to be worrying about right now.
Yeah, Victor.
And Louis, yeah, go, John. Go. I know you wanted to
Real
say
quick, I was
something.
going to say I was at Valpo too, remotely, and then South Alabama this week. But Victor, I'm preaching. I'm going to South Alabama Thursday. Diversify for all the young people out there. Take extra stats classes, MBA, aviation class, tropical class, marketing. You got to understand how to communicate probabilistics. And James, I know you told him the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what John was on fire. I wish there was a way I could recorded what you said to those kids at VU this Saturday and replay that to all of these young people. It was just right on target. So, but yeah, I think there is a future. And real quick, and we have to take a break in a second, but Louis, just out of curiosity, and you might want to share this, have you talked with Ken Graham at all in the last couple of weeks?
I've been to a couple of retirement parties or gatherings at the Weather Service NOAA complex there in Silver Spring, and I talked to him, and he seemed determined. I didn't ask him for details. We're in a very precarious situation, I believe, but he seemed determined, and quite aware of the obviously of the threat. The undermining of the organization and the cracks in the wall, I would say. I was glad to see him determined. That was a good outward face. But I made a point. The thing about the Weather Service directors, we say, I never call. Nobody ever called me. If I wanted to interact with a prior Weather Service director, I would call them, and that's the way it worked all the way back up the line. So I was glad to have seen him and talk with him briefly, and like I said, he seemed determined with respect to the current situation.
Well, that's good. And again, I know that he can't say anything publicly, and that's the most frustrating thing. Like Tom Skilling said, we don't know anything. We don't understand who's going to be cut next, the plan, what's the 1-year plan. We don't know. Nobody knows. And that's so stinking frustrating. But the thing is, the bottom line for me, and you guys know this, if one person loses their life because of what's going on now, shame on everybody. Yeah. But whether it's, a model that's not as accurate because of the lack of upper air data, because we don't have the balloon data anymore, and it causes a model to be erroneous, and there's an erroneous forecast, and the timing is off, or whether we don't have a technician to go fix a radar that goes down. Right. There's a lot of moving parts here. And ultimately, if somebody's life is lost, and that's when it hits home here, Tom. This is serious business. So
Oh,
I'll say really
James,
quickly,
you're so right.
Louis mentioned this. We do know what the plan is. The plan is out there, right? It's maybe not how they're executing it, and they're not being transparent about it, but the plan is out there. I think that's a very important piece, is that there are clear documented plans out there of what is trying to be done. And I think we all need to be aware of what those plans are and step up in terms of advocacy. We believe in this enterprise as much as I do. We have to advocate for it.
Well, it's going to be interesting. I still think this is a third rail. I think the public's on our side. And if the public is given the story about what's going on, they understand the importance of weather information. And James, you make a great point. If you're going to be a legislator who cuts the budget, and by God, there's a disaster that involves a meteorological catastrophe, then somebody's going to point the finger at you and say, hey, maybe if you hadn't cut the budget, this might not have happened. And they better be aware of the fact they're going to be held accountable for this at some point down the road, because we do postmortems on disasters and all. And, you cut too much, you're cutting meat as far as I'm concerned with the National Weather Service. If there's waste there, I sure don't see it. And I haven't seen it right along. I've been amazed at what a well-oiled machine it is. And it's been a privilege to be a part of this all these years. And I say, again, I go back to the basic notion. If it ain't broken, why are you trying to fix it? This is not the agency. If you're looking for fat and bloat, the National Weather Service isn't the place to go for it. In fact, there probably are some federal agencies that would do well to study how the Weather Service has kept all these balls in the air and so successfully. I mean, it's a well-run organization. And, meteorology is a moving target. We learn things every day. Victor, my God, what you've told us, work from young researchers like you has so expanded our knowledge of severe weather. I mean, you've got us a new feel for how what we consider Tornado Alley has been shifting and is being impacted. It's just stunning work.
And these long range graphics that Victor's producing, those are outstanding, by the way. He showed me that when I was in his office. I'm thinking, whoa, and they're darn good, Victor, and they're very useful. So thank you. I don't know if anybody's ever thanked you, but I'm thanking you.
Thank you, Tom. That was very kind. And James, thank you. But you know what? All that data relies on National Weather Service input.
Yeah.
Right. All that model graph. I mean, yeah, there's some secret sauce and post-processing and machine learning that goes on behind the scenes, but the origin of the data is data run from EMC, right? So, I mean, if I don't have that, I can't do that type of research. And as we're sitting here talking about forecasts getting degraded, I'm looking at my own research going, well, I'm trying to do week 2 forecasts and subseasonal forecasts. And here we are looking at the degradation of skill of day 1 and day 2 forecasts because we're not going to have upper air observations. Louis got his hand up.
Yeah, I was just Jim, you cut me off when you have to, but we haven't talked about the farmers. We haven't talked about the week 2 to week 4 forecast, which has a lot of uncertainty in it, everybody will admit, but decisions have to be made on the farm. Now, the reason I'm mentioning that is that was one of the areas that we were really focusing on. There's a new kid in town. It's called the flash drought. Droughts were thought of as evolving over a period of time. Flash droughts occur after you've made your decision. Farmers have made the decisions based on a monthly forecast that says, hey, above normal precip, everything looks up. And then by the time you get to the end of that month, you got a full-blown drought that's ripping through South Dakota, northern Nebraska, and what like. This is a big challenge, right? This was one of the grand research challenges that we were starting to focus on, 3 years ago. So that's disrupted. And I'm bringing this up because Lisa Dent, the Bill, the thing that you heard about was this radio broadcast, and we did it live, and now we're doing she's on a farm right now. Her husband's a farmer. She's all upset because of what it means to the farming community. So you have this sense that from an emergency management, public safety point of view, from a fire mitigation perspective, from an agricultural perspective, from an aviation perspective. We haven't talked about space weather. We haven't talked about coastal areas much, but all these people are concerned. And Tom, maybe you're right. You know, this will be a third rail and all that. But like I said, I went back and found this book because I read it back in 2009, and this is the playbook. This is the playbook that's being followed today, and our frustration is part of the outcome that they want, right? Because it's just really bizarre, and like I said before, and the thing that got me to speak up was the cruelty to the people that got terminated.
Yeah.
Some of them with 15-minute notice. The MIC was forced to give them this message, and they had to clean out their desk and get
on a Friday night at 11 p.m. Let's not forget that either.
I mean, it's just it's just something that I cannot believe that I would ever seen something like this for an organization that's focused on public safety. All right. So anyway.
Go, Troy.
I said it's a third rail. That's not to suggest I'm not worried about it. And I'm not even sure if I think it is a third rail. I'm not sure that some of the people putting these policies in effect don't give a darn whether it's a third rail or not. They'll go ahead and do it anyway. Who knows? But I think we've got to, that's James, what you're doing, what you and Bill are doing through this program and giving us a forum, and what we did on WGN radio, and we've got a TV piece we're working on, trying to tell the public is busy with their lives. They don't have time to research the idiosyncrasies of the weather information they're getting. They presume it'll always be there because it always has been. And I think they'll be surprised when they find out, when things start disappearing or they aren't as reliable as they once were, what's going on. And it's too late then to perhaps turn the clock back and maybe prevent some of the degradation of the meteorological system that they've been accustomed to all these years, which has made such incredible progress.
Well, one thing that I'm going to say, and I'm going to probably may make some people angry here, but and I know last week in Huntsville, I visited with a few of my colleagues about this. I'm hearing from some people out there that the way this has played in the news media has been that, well, NOAA forecast the weather. This is all I heard. It was headline, NOAA forecast the weather. The public is generally ignorant as to government setup and so forth. And I think it's real important they realize that NOAA is a part of the Department of Commerce, which is what, 44,000 people. And then you've got NOAA, which was 14, maybe 13 now, thousand. And you got the Weather Service at about 4,000. But folks, make no mistake, we can't do it without some of the folks in NOAA. Kim, we have our modeling people that have been affected. We have the National Centers for Environmental Prediction as part of that, and also the satellite folks. But make no mistake, it is the National Weather Service and the men and women that work for the National Weather Service that are forecasting the weather at 122 WFOs around this country. And folks, and by the way, NOAA has enjoyed that relationship. You know why NOAA has enjoyed that? Because they know how popular the Weather Service is. I'll tell you, well, can't tell you that story. But I'll tell you the bottom line is it's the National Weather Service that predicts it. We can't do it without NOAA, especially with the modeling, climate, satellite folks over there. And if we bring them in the Weather Service, I think that might be good. And get especially NCEI, because the first thing I'd do is redo their website. Editorial comment. But bottom line, folks, it's the men and women of the National Weather Service that are predicting that weather every day, and they bust their butts for us. And they do it for what? $7 or $8 a year of our federal tax money.
$4, Troy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit inflated, Tom, but at the same time, I think it's $7 or $8 a year for the standard for protection of life and property.
6.3 billion weather observations a day. 6.3 billion weather observations a day are collected and disseminated by this organization.
Yeah.
There are 1.5 million weather forecasts produced by the National Weather Service every year and 50,000 weather warnings. And they do this with 4,200 people working 24/7, 365 days a year. I call that, when you divide it out among 330 million people, a pretty good deal. I mean, really.
Well, I mean, the bottom line, Tom, the bottom line is it's really the only federal agency which serves every person. I got a weather radio right there. And I know that Bruce is with us also online, that those people down in New Braunfels down the road here can trigger. And we did that last night in the Austin area. I just don't think there's another federal agency that serves the general public like the National Weather Service does day in and day out.
I agree with you.
And on that note, we have to take a quick break here. We're running really late. We're going to hear from Jen and This Week in Tornado History. We're going to come back and bring in Bruce Jones with Midland. And what we'll probably do this week is just everybody that's got a pick of the week, we'll just put it up on the website. But having said that, let's hear from Jen This Week in Tornado History. We're going to come back and bring in Bruce Jones as WeatherBrains rolls along.
This week in tornado history, it is called the Governor's Tornado. This twister moved 14.8 miles through parts of Fulton County, Georgia on March 24th, 1975. It began in West Atlanta, moving to the northeast at approximately 50 miles per hour and ended in the Brookhaven area. The tornado hit an industrial area, 2 large apartment complexes, several businesses, and hundreds of, quote, fine homes. It also hit the governor's mansion located off West Paces Ferry Road. 550 families were reported homeless. The damage was estimated at $56.5 million, and there were 3 fatalities. Arthur Sosmer was killed when a 2-story brick and concrete wall of the L.D. Brinkman Company collapsed on his car. Catherine Hunkin was killed when an 80-foot tree crashed into the bedroom where she was sleeping with her husband, Walter. And Mark Howard was working at a Pepsi vending warehouse. The roof and walls collapsed and he was crushed. Over 150 people were injured along the path. Read more about this event at tornadotalk.com.
And it's been a historic and frankly disheartening conversation tonight as we unpack the real world consequences of what these cuts to the National Weather Service might do. But, there's one bright beacon in all this, one place that the National Weather Service infrastructure still stands strong and will, hopefully, for a long time to come, and that's NOAA Weather Radio, system that works 24/7, Bruce Jones. We've run long tonight. We usually play guess what hotel Bruce is in this time of year because he's traveling around the country speaking to our emergency managers, that important link in this warning process. Where are you tonight, Bruce?
Yeah.
Cherokee, North Carolina.
Oh,
North Carolina
Casino again.
It's a casino. Yeah, it's a casino.
This is becoming a pattern. All right. Somebody get the Gamblers Anonymous line for Bruce.
Yeah.
But one thing we're not gambling on this time of year is tornado safety, Bruce, and we're going to have more tornadoes this week, obviously. Yep. Talk about NOAA Weather Radio and that important service, and thank you to Midland for being part of this show and supporting what we do.
Sure.
And then you got a special offer for our listeners.
Yeah, I do. First of all, I'll say this is 2025 is the 50th anniversary of President Gerald Ford designating NOAA Weather Radio as our official federal warning system. And that was done in the aftermath of the 74 super outbreak, when the warnings were coming so fast and furious that they overloaded the weather wire service, and the TV and radio stations couldn't get the appropriate warnings for their area fast enough. So in January of 1975, Gerald Ford signed the papers that designated NOAA Weather Radio as America's official federal warning system, which it still is. So it's 1,036 transmitters nationwide that serve about 94% of the U.S. population at a cost of just pennies per minute on transmitter cost. And we need to make sure that this NOAA Weather Radio network not only stays operational, but is expanded and improved. Get rid of the copper wires. Let's get some more efficient ways of sending the signal. Thank you, Troy.
Yeah.
Sending the signal from the forecast office out to the transmitters, because each National Weather Service forecast office can run anywhere from 10 to 13 of these transmitters. And these old copper wires from the 1960s and 70s, they need to be replaced. So the network still runs very, very well. It did an outstanding job during this past tornado outbreak. We'll probably see more severe weather coming on Saturday and Sunday. So I honestly encourage everyone to have multiple redundant ways of getting these alerts. The National Weather Service is the best on the planet at forecasting severe weather days in advance and then giving out the life-saving warnings minutes in advance, giving you the time to get your family to shelter. But you've got to have more than one way to get the warnings. And make sure NOAA Weather Radio is tops on your list of how you and your family stay prepared and alert. If you'll use the promo code SPAN25, that's SPANN 25, that's the promo code to use at midlandusa.com, and you can get 25% off a weather radio. These make great gifts: Mother's Day gifts, Father's Day gifts, birthday gifts, Grandparents' Day, whatever the occasion. Buy a life-saving NOAA weather radio, because within a few years, you're going to get a phone call from that person that you gifted that radio to, and they're going to thank you, because it'll be that one day or that one night where they weren't paying attention and the weather radio alerted them and saved their lives. Midlandusa.com is the website. The promo code is SPAN25. SPANN25 is the promo code at midlandusa.com. Let's make a NOAA weather radio as common in homes as smoke detectors.
And I will say, Bruce, I think we had a lot of folks buying those down here a couple of weeks ago, leading up to that high-risk event we had this Saturday a week ago. The demand was great. And again, now is the time to act, because we have a long way to go in the severe weather season. And every home, every business needs one. It doesn't rely on a cell network. It is absolutely a necessity. So thanks for that message. So let's do this. We're so late. James Adelot had to go do the 9 o'clock news. Tom, you ever done the 9 o'clock news before?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for a couple of
Tom is
The 9
Tom
o'clock
is the 9 o'clock news. But I thought what we do here is just everybody's got. We'll do what we're going to do is put the picks of the week up on the website. Everybody's pick is in, and we're going to put those on WeatherBrains.com. But let's everybody have one final parting word. It's been a hard conversation tonight, but a good conversation, one that needed to happen. So let's have a parting word from everybody. So Tom Skilling, give us one parting word on everything we've talked about tonight.
James, first of all, thank you for lending us this incredible platform to get the word out. Because I think when the public finds out what's happening, they're going to be engaged. And our weather service is amazing, and it deserves our support. They haven't done anything wrong. This is an efficient, lean, mean organization that's taken us through a revolution in meteorological science and put it out to us in terms of better forecasts, better communications. I mean, the data, all of us would agree that we can look at today that gives us a fighting chance to figuring out what nature's going to do tomorrow is just stunning. So thank you, James, for that. And to all of my colleagues, too, and to everybody at the National Weather Service, hang in there, folks, because we've got your back. And we just admire you so. You're an amazing group of people.
And that's great, Tom. And again, I totally agree. We will fight for you. There's so many things they can't say right now, but we will fight for you. So, Paul, if you're still with us, give us some final words, your final thoughts on everything we talked about tonight.
Well, James, I really appreciate this opportunity of being on with you guys tonight. This has been a great show, and I just like to say that, hey, thanks to everybody. I've had a long and great career in weather. I started in 1959, and just last year was retired finally from Tom's Tribune weather page.
Yes.
And so I put in a lot of years, and it's been a lot of fun. And I want to give students today, I want them to really look forward to something, because if you're liking weather, stick with it. Stick with it. It's going to be tough for the next couple of years, obviously, but stick with it. I can still remember when I was sitting in a chair forecasting in Cleveland, Ohio, and I turned around in that chair. I was the assistant chief at that time. And I turned around in the chair and I said, man, how can a guy get paid for having so much fun? So that's how I looked. That's how I looked at weather, and that's how I still look at it today. So there's still a future there. But boy, the next couple of years may be pretty tough. Thanks a lot for having me on tonight.
It's a treat, Paul. Louis, final words from you. Everybody's listening to you, so give us some final words.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on again. I can't remember whether this is the third time or fourth time or whatever, but it's always been great being this. And I think you, Jim, and your whole team here. This is really phenomenal. And thanks for having us on. It really is about the people. When all is said and done, it's what's happening to the people today who are trying to make this work on a 24/7 for 365 days because they believe in their mission. Okay. And I can say that with certainty because when we had McKinsey Company come in back in 2013 and 14, they did the survey. I'm sure, John probably stuffed the ballot box, but 80% of the people said they came to the Weather Service, whether they came from the military, administrative assistants, 4K, whatever. 80% they came because they believed in the mission. I switched from NASA to the Weather Service because I wanted to be part of that mission. I wanted to be part of the modernization. I wanted to make it work. This is what the people are doing today. This is what the younger people coming up want to be part of. And I honestly believe there'll be something here. The National Weather Service will be here to be the catcher's mitt for the next generation coming up. I firmly believe that, and that's why I came on tonight. And there's one last story. My first visit was to a Weather Bureau office in the mid-1960s. My aunt set up, and a supervisor met. It was in Garden City, Long Island. The first person he walked me over to was a guy who was doing the surface analysis, and it must have been a bad day because when I got introduced to him, he said, "Hey, kid, don't get into this field. There's no future here." That was 1966. And then the MIC turned me around and walked me to the guy who was now working with the new satellite strips. And he was the one who said, if you really get into this, this is the future. Okay. And he mentioned, that's the first time I heard Sumi's name mentioned, was in 1966. All right.
Oh.
And I wanted to be a meteorologist anyway, but that first guy was and then so within the same office, you had that different view, even back then. So I firmly believe we're going to get through this. This is really hard to watch from the inside looking in, but it is about the people. I do believe there's a future for this because public safety is going to demand this all the way as far as I can see the future. So that's all I have to say here. And thank you for having us. Thank you for having us.
No, it's a great word, Louis. Great word. Thank you. Okay, Victor, give us a good word. Final thoughts.
I'll be somewhat brief, but again, thanks. This has been such an amazing show. And, I think we're going through probably some of the biggest changes in the National Weather Service since modernization. I'm not talking about changes for the good, right? This is not necessarily something that we all would favor to see, obviously. And in some ways, it's sort of like we're going through, I said this before, every storm has a beginning and an end. And I think we're going through one of these storms in our community, and there will be cleanup, right? And there will be recovery after. But I'll tell you, so many of my friends and colleagues in the Weather Service are some of the hardest working, most dedicated people that you'll ever come across in the federal government. And I think there's reason for optimism. I tend to be an optimist myself, but I think there is reason for optimism, and I think we'll come out on the other side stronger. It might be short-term pain, but if any entity is going to recover from something like this and come back stronger, it's going to be the weather enterprise.
Short-term pain, long-term gain. Let's hope it works out that way. Great words, Victor. John Gordon, give us some final words, your final thoughts on this whole thing.
Yeah, James. First off, thanks, Jen, for having me part of WeatherBrains. I love the team here. I'm very happy. This is great. I did this, Louis, you know this. I did the shareholders report in Louisville for 20 years. I did it in Huntsville for 3 years prior to that. Basically, it's a what do we do with your money? What did we get? What did you get from the Weather Service? And for the price of a Big Mac, a lousy Big Mac, that is what it costs the average person, right? Tom, you love Big Macs. And we work hard. I'll just tell you, the Weather Service has been good to me for 40 years, paid the bills. And I agree with what Paul Daly said. I love doing surface maps, upper air maps, working radar, mesoscale analysis. I got to hear Ted Fujita one time speak. That was a thrill of a lifetime. And the Weather Service really, the men and women work really hard for your dollar. That's a fact, Jack.
Absolutely.
All right, you heard it. Okay, Troy Kimmel, give us your final word.
Well, this show has been incredible. I'm going to have to go back and sit and watch it a couple of times, but I'm going to say a couple of things. I've never had the honor to meet Victor before, but let me tell you what I do know. And I know students who he has had the influence on. And what they're doing now is because of the work that Victor and his colleagues have done and the outreach that they've done. I know that. Victor, it's a pleasure, and we appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Troy.
Paul Daly, in Chicago, your history. I mean, you go way back, and we learn from that. And it's such an honor to have you with us tonight to hear your input with all this, Louis. Why you would have ever given me your cell phone number back in the day, I would never understand that, and I hope that I never abused that when I called. And I still got it, Louis. But I love you, sir, and a very good friend. And the next one's is more of a personal one with Tom Skilling.
Oh.
Tom and I go way back, and I'll tell you now for what Tom has done for this business. And I know his interns mean this. Tom and I've had some talks that really, Tom, we probably should never have to have about students and what's happened to interns with both of us.
Yeah.
But I'm going to tell you, Tom, love you and respect you and everything you've done. A true honor. And then I'll say this on the 1,001st show, and that's all my colleagues on WeatherBrains. Love y'all. This is a historic show tonight.
Right
and
back at
Well,
you.
it's an important show, and I appreciate everybody's candor and their willingness to kind of wear their heart on their sleeve here.
Yeah.
But at some point, you just have to, and I think this was therapy. It's therapeutic for me.
Yeah.
Everybody understands the topic here, and we have a kindred spirit, and I like being around people like that. Okay, Jen, give us your final thoughts. Go.
I haven't said a whole lot because I think my brain is just full and my heart is very full. And, I'm usually the person who tries to find like the bow and, kind of wrap everything up and, make everything sweet or whatever. And I just can't do that right now fully. I'm very optimistic. I'm always going to be. I am a huge champion for the National Weather Service. I am a very, very small cog in the weather machine as a radio broadcast meteorologist since 1997 and currently doing 60 cities around the country. I cannot do my job. I can't without the National Weather Service. Period. The end. I do not have the skill set to forecast for all of these markets. From Portland, Maine to Cape Cod, as I knock over my my stuff over here, I do not have the skill set to do it. So I have to rely on the National Weather Service. They have the skill set to do it. I do not. As a new tornado historian, the audio I did tonight, where did that come from? Storm data. That's the National Weather Service. I think what we learned tonight is how far-reaching the National Weather Service is and how far we have come even from that 1975 event and doing the track information and all that and the rating systems and what have you to where we are now. The only really comment I put in the chat was as we're going through what the National Weather Service does, and where my heart beats fast is obviously the warning system, but the surveys after the tornadoes or after a severe weather event. Who's going to do that? They have to. They have the skill set to do it. It's so hard to do. John, I said, can I go on a survey with you sometime? I just wanted to see how it worked because I can see it from behind the scenes, but I wanted to see how it worked. And I didn't get a chance to do so. And I really hope I can at some point to be able to go out and to be able to do a survey. But I think for me, I am honored to be even sitting in this room and just in talking to you all and the insight that I've been able to gather. I'm just going to take it away and I'm just going to go noodle it and pray on it and see how can I be an advocate. What does that look like? Who do I need to go call or march to or something? And how can I help in my small way? But I'm very honored to even be a part of this group and to learn every week from you all and to learn from every one of you your opinions and your insight into what's going on right now.
So I've tried to kind of put Kim and Rick toward the end here. I don't know how much you can say or what you want to say, but Rick, let me just give you the floor if you need to say anything here about what's
Oh my
being
God,
talked
I've been
about
waiting
tonight.
over 2 hours to talk, so where do I start? Sit back and no. Man, first of all, Tom and Louie and Paul and Victor, thank you so much for being here. Your advocacy, your support means the absolute world. Everybody out there that's supporting, all the kind words. The Weather Service is in a dark time right now. We hear people say, well, we go through this from time to time. No, we've never been through anything like this ever before. So we appreciate their support. It's little things, just like anything you can do to just let your Weather Service office know that you're behind them. These people are working their asses off, if I can say that. I mean, that you don't see some of the shortages because we work so hard to pick up the slack, and a lot of times it's just transparent to everybody out there. But I can tell you, as several of you have said, we have some of the most dedicated, passionate people anywhere in any business, and I couldn't be more proud to be working with them. And just know, I can't speak for everybody, but your love, your support, your advocacy is more important now than it's ever been, and we do appreciate it.
Okay, Kim, floor belongs to you.
Man, what an honor it is. I don't know what I did so great in my life to be here with you all right now, but I look on the screen and see everything from people that I was inspired by as a child all the way to people I know I'm inspiring now in my own career, and I just see a family. And I've often thought about what is it that made this country so special for weather, because it is. And we are second to none. Our whole system, from Tom, what you've done, what you and James and everybody in broadcast has done in the private sector, to the National Weather Service backbone and all the infrastructure we've talked about tonight, other private sector companies, academia, where so much of the theory has been built and inspired. And I just think, why here? What was so special? And I have to, the social scientist in me can't help but think about how meteorology is a really interesting symbol of a kind of national prosperity and wealth. It's almost a modern indicator of the success of a nation, because at its heart, it is a fundamental belief and investment in the future. We believe that the future matters. We invest in knowing about it so that we can prepare for it, so that we can do our best to be productive in the face of it. And weather will envelop us always, no matter where we are on this planet. And it has been a special thing for weather to develop the way it has in this country. I hope that it persists here. And what I see on the screen will never be replaceable. And it is such a huge part of my identity and my heart, what is on this screen. But I also believe that no matter what comes here, our science and our people will prevail wherever we put ourselves, because there's so many people on this planet who share our optimism in that future and who care so much about where our planet meets its people. And there will always be us. So whoever's listening to us and is inspired in this, whatever you're feeling about what's going on now, find your place and continue to remake it. We'll always need what we have here.
Beautiful.
And that's great, Kim. And I love this next generation. Victor, when I was on your campus, I told those kids this, and I mean it. I love this next generation. They're smart. They're innovative. They're hardworking. They're doing it for the right reason. And don't get discouraged. Don't do it. Follow your passion, and it's going to be okay. It will be okay. But having said that, Bill Murray, I'll let you wrap it up with your final words and kind of plug the next couple of episodes here, because we do have to go. We've already lost James Adelot to the 9 o'clock news. We're going to run into the 10 o'clock news here. So, Bill, go.
Yeah, I was going to say Tom Skilling was the original 9 o'clock news before 9 o'clock news were cool. But James, I just want to say that, we say every week that our listeners and these folks that love weather are the ambassadors. We tell them around the water cooler, at school, at work, at church, with your friends, with your neighbors, with your family members, you're the ambassadors. And if this message has touched you tonight, make sure you carry that message with you. So, don't let it stop here. We all know that the National Weather Service is one of the most efficient, life-saving federal agencies that we have. It's not bloated. It's under threat. And there just needs to be careful consideration given to what's being done here. And we need to all support and, offer up our prayers for, Neil as he takes on this job, because he knows what he's getting into. And hopefully he can help, get a message across that, that protects some of these things we've talked about tonight. But talk about what you've heard tonight. Share it, write, call, visit with your lawmakers, with your political, with your political folks. Be that voice that speaks up, because here's an opportunity to make a difference, James. And after this show tonight, James, I think we ought to just call it quits. I think this is it.
We're done.
We're done. This is it. It's over with.
Don't you dare, Bill.
And again, real quick,
we'll be back next week with Carly Ann. And the week after that, we have Dr. Steven Strader. So we'll be picking up really important work and moving forward. So don't you worry about that. We're not going anywhere. We will continue to do this. But many thanks to Tom Skilling for reaching out all this week and making this happen. Tom, you're the best. And we've really enjoyed our time tonight with you and all of your friends.
Thank you, Bill. What an honor. What an honor.
All right. Well, guys, for those that are new here, we typically don't go quite this long, but that's okay. Sometimes we do. I mean, so what? I mean, we needed to go this long tonight. If you are new here, we're typically on the air Monday nights at 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern on the WeatherBrains YouTube channel, youtube.com/WeatherBrains. Most people listen to the audio podcast that comes out late every Monday night, but we'd love to hear from you. If you want to say anything about the things we've talked about tonight, give us some feedback. The email address here, it's email@weatherbrains.com. And by the way, our picks of the week will be on the website, weatherbrains.com. So it's some really good picks this week. So thanks to all of our esteemed guests. It's an honor for me to be here. On behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week, and God bless.
Thank you, James.
Thanks, guys. Great show.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks so
everybody.
much.
Thanks, everybody.
Absolutely.